Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of the Chrissie Mayr podcast. We are on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes if that is where you're listening to us right now. Otherwise, I appreciate comments, both, positive, mostly positive. Negative ones are going to come in, but, I like your feedback. I always appreciate when you guys tag people that I should interview. So keep all of that coming. I'm doing stand-up this weekend. Actually, this Friday, I'll be at the Stress Factory in Bridgeport, Connecticut, doing 2 shows, October 29th, 7:30 and 9:30. Get your tickets now. And then I'll be in New Jersey that following Saturday, November 6th at Tiff's Ale House, aka the Dojo of Comedy in Morris Plains, New Jersey. That's going to be one show at 9 o'clock. You can check out my website, ChrissieMayr.com, for tickets. Quick shout out to our sponsor. We all know dating apps are horrible. They're superficial. You're swiping faces. There's quote unquote expert matching apps. Both usually waste your time. The solution is a values-based matching system. If you're conservative, things probably aren't going to work out with someone who's a total lefty. Same with religion, lifestyle, how to raise your kids, and other core values. Sure, somebody could change along the way, but who knows if that's genuine. It's better to just get that right out of the gate to know where the values lie with the person that you're trying to meet. Why not just find that perfect match? Nobody's perfect, but we can get close to it, I guess. Drom is a new free values-based dating app. You pick the deal breakers and deal makers. Drom is also video only for more human interactions. So go to Drom.Date/CMP in your phone's browser. Click the iOS or Google button to install and use the invite code CMP to sign up. And if you're already matched up, tell your friends and get your partner to tell their friends. That's Drom.Date/CMP, designed to meet your perfect match. It's free to use and you have nothing to lose. I almost wish I was single so I could try it. I've met all my boyfriends in person. It's so retro, so old school. I'm so excited to have this guy back on the podcast today. Woo! He's hot. He's a best-selling author. He's a math PhD. He's the founder of New Discourses. He's the king of the world. I think I'm going to make my boyfriend dress as him for Halloween this year. It's James Lindsay. Hello. Welcome back.
That was what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
It's good to be here. Thank you. Thank you.
It is so good to be here. I am so sad that I missed you in Nashville. I was in Nashville all weekend for this medical freedom convention that was happening at the Gaylord Opryland Hotel, like the biggest, most fabulous. Basically, it's like an indoor rainforest. It's an indoor mall. There's so many restaurants and bars. And then they also had this, really cool convention going on. So I'm sorry.
It is a phenomenon. But Tennessee is a very odd state, and I don't live in Nashville. It is 3 states long and half a state deep, is what a friend of mine said. And do with that what you want. And so I actually am a solid 3.5 hour drive away from Nashville, where I live in Tennessee.
Seriously, wow. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's skinny and long, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and shaped like a parallelogram, which makes me, for some reason, go into the mind of like George Costanza making a knuckle reference in Seinfeld. Since we're doing that awkwardly,
that is helpful to know. 3 states wide, 1 state
3 states long and half a state deep.
Half a state deep. Okay, so I feel less bad. It would have been a 3.5 hour drive
each way.
Woof.
Yeah,
that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah.
But I definitely want to go back. I've never been to Tennessee. I just was like, all right, country music. I spent a little bit of time kind of in the downtown area. I was notified kind of last minute to a Jack Murphy Jacked brunch, which I went to, which was very cool.
I was invited to said brunch, but I couldn't go.
So
life happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's a happening place, but as an East Tennessean, I would actually tell you, you still haven't been to Tennessee, because that's Middle Tennessee, and we don't count that part.
Oh, really? Oh,
3 states long, Middle, East, and West Tennessee. Yeah, but it's a little Tennessee thing. It's not real.
Every state has their little like funny ways of describing where like the hit area is, or the best area. Like if I tell somebody, oh, I live in Westchester, like, oh, you're upstate, and then they disregard anything I have to say after that, and that's kind of, I'm like, oh wow, But then you ask people that are like Buffalo, like genuine upstate, and they're like, oh, you're basically,
You're in
you
the
think you're
city.
too good? You think you're a city folk? And
Yeah.
then I tell them I'm born and raised in Long Island. And they go, oh, okay, you're just trash. And I go, there we go. That's,
Roger.
yeah.
Well,
Okay,
now,
cool. I
now
guess
we're on equal footing. The trash footing has equalized the conversation. We're ready to.
I want to go back. I want to, like, I don't know. I feel like there's so much more to unearth in Tennessee.
There's a lot. There's lots of Civil War bullets you can unearth. That's a thing we do here.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay, so
battlefields, and people go out with metal detectors and find them. Or at least that was a thing when I was a kid. I don't know if people still do that.
that's neat. I've been to Harper's Ferry, which I think is in West Virginia, and they sell a lot of Civil War bullets, or like at least bullets that they're trying to. Maybe they, who knows? Maybe they leave them out like wet so they can look sort of oxidized and old. But I bought like a rusty Bill of Rights. Oh, it's over here somewhere. Oh, yeah. And my sister is a history teacher, so I bought her like a tea stained. They have all these tea stained documents for sale, and I was like, oh, I gotta get this. You know what I mean? Like, we gotta know what our documents say. And then you open it up, and you're like, oh, I can't read this shit at all. It's written in the most teeniest, tiniest.
Right. Be it resolved that you can't read this without glasses, and we're not
Yeah.
going to admit our age and wear glasses to read things.
Yeah, hereforth. Anyway, it's teabagged, so that's all that matters. I remember when I would make reports for like 7th grade, and I would just sort of light it on fire a little bit and dunk it in tea, but it really wasn't. I should have spent all that time probably researching.
No, it's all appearances. That's the world we live in right now. It's all appearances.
True that. I want to talk to you about an interesting new development. I'm sure you've heard about this today. This is just in. A judge identifies that the men who were shot by Kyle Rittenhouse, that we should identify them as rioters, looters, and arsonists rather than victims before the trial. Rittenhouse's lawyers can refer to the men he shot as rioters and looters, but the prosecutors may not call them victims at any time during the upcoming trial. And James, you talk a lot about the language manipulation that is going on with the left, and really kind of unfortunately seeping into like larger culture. Do you see this as a little bit of a win, a little bit of a step in the right direction?
Oh yeah, certainly. This is something new. It's actually something kind of exciting. So I'm glad you brought it up. This specific incident or instance is of course interesting in its own right. But what I've been saying for a little while, you can imagine like a metaphor, like there's a dam or something, right? It holds back the water and the reservoir. You're in Tennessee. We have those all over the place. And then the dam is cracked and water's coming through, right? And so this is another instance where water is coming through. Previously, the left has been very successful at controlling the circumstances by controlling the language that people use. And this is a very intentional strategy, by the way, that they have been employing on purpose since at least the 60s. But they did it before this. The left has done this repeatedly for a long time. But they try to control the linguistic terrain because they understand that words have ambiguity in their meaning, but they also have kind of connotations, and they bring up the feels and all of that. Critical race theory, for example, is a subject that we've talked about in the past. It explicitly says that legal storytelling should be a thing. It's an entire chapter in the book, Critical Race Theory and Introduction, is on legal storytelling, which is why they want to bring in stories and jerk the heartstrings and all of this. And this is an example of that. They're victims that pulls on heartstrings, that makes you frame out what happened in a certain way. That's actually loaded language. So the judge coming in and saying that we're not going to identify them that way shows that, again, in another place, we're seeing a crack in the dam where the water's coming through, where their control of the leftists' control of our kind of institutional field is falling apart a little bit. This isn't the biggest crack or gap or whatever, or leak, but this one is significant because we're seeing kind of an increasing array of these kinds of wins occurring, where people are actually hitting that point where they've seen enough, they've said enough is enough, and they're going to start trying to take back, whether it's linguistic terrain or whatever else. Dave Chappelle obviously is kind of the biggest example in the news right now for that. He jokes, if you want to talk to me about the trans, that's fine. You just have to say that Hannah Gadsby's not funny. That's hilarious. Because
right,
I mean,
we're starting from a point of reality because she's not funny.
I told my wife about this, and she started cracking up, and she's like, "Who's Hannah Gadsby?" And I was like, "I don't know. She looks like Dilbert," and that's as far as it all went.
Yeah,
I
she's
know,
lesbian Dilbert. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Vax Adams over here could have created her, and so this is the Dave Chappelle, though. He took it further, right? He had his statement that he made last night. So this is almost like a hole in the dam with water streaming through. He's like, I'm not going to bend the knee. You're not going to tell me what to do. He has this stance he's taken, and I think that this story with Rittenhouse and the judge is just another example where normal people in sometimes professional positions and sometimes just normal moms and dads, especially right now, everywhere in the country, are enough. Like all last year, I was telling people, you got to stand up now, it's going to get harder, stand up now. And they were like, no, I might lose my job. I might get lectured at work. Somebody might get mad at me. I might lose a friend. And I was like, okie dokie. And now people are like, oh, wow, well, it's worth it. I mean, another crack in the dam. I don't know if you saw the thing with Justin Trudeau's security sniper thing.
No.
This is going around. I don't know but apparently, if I have the story correct, I think I watched the video, so it's real, obviously. I saw a video on Twitter. It must be real, but it's allegedly, Justin Trudeau. He's a Canadian. That's our communist neighbor to the north, and he's prime commissar or whatever he is of Canada land, and he has a security detail and has a sniper, or a lead sniper, maybe many snipers to protect him. He's, head of state. And the guy's like, I don't care if I lose my job, no more tyranny, no more medical tyranny, no more segregating, like this whole thing. So the cracks in the dam are starting to show. Their narratives aren't holding up well. The manipulations that they used, that Rittenhouse is on trial in the first place, like he is, the manipulations seem to be kind of crumbling a bit. And this is an encouraging development.
I'm trying to search for this Trudeau thing that you're mentioning.
Well, I mean, I retweeted it, I think, which would mean that it's 3,000 miles down my Twitter feed since it was last night or whatever. So, I mean, I might have that wrong. I don't think I have it wrong, but yeah, this guy did this video anyway, and if you can find it,
here it is.
Okay. Yeah, I found it like right away. I typed into Twitter Trudeau sniper, and it's all over the place.
I guess you're better at searching than me. No, you know what it is? It's like I get under. I'm like, oh, find it quickly.
Am I in charge of the live stream now? Is that what happened? I don't know what happened to her, but I will just fill in while she tries to figure out her tech things, unless it's my tech thing that's the problem. Absolutely massive interview that I'm sharing today. I tried to fill the dead air for you.
That link didn't work, Frank. Okay. Here we go. Exclusive Trudeau's. All right, I found it. It's coming.
He says he's prepared to leave his job over the vaccine mandate. His personal sniper detail is prepared to leave their jobs over his vaccine mandate, which the officers call authoritarian type behavior, with a U because it's in communist Canada, that they will have no part in. And so, yeah, here it is. Things are there. That's the video. That's what I was reading just now on the Twitter link that was in there. And so, yeah, something exciting is going on. People are realizing that stuff's at risk, and they've got to speak up and do something. That this isn't normal and natural, or like, oh wow, we have this problem, we have to make some sacrifices to solve it. Something's up.
Were you ever worried at a point like, okay, well, this one ruling was made that we have to call them protesters, rioters, looters. We can't call them victims. Do you think it was a big goal of the left to sort of get to the point so where the folks who are making those decisions will not go that way? They would purposely, like, basically not acknowledge reality, that it was out of self-defense. Do you think that was sort of the left's plan to get to a point where what just happened wouldn't happen?
Yeah, their thing is total narrative control. It doesn't matter what it is; it's total narrative control. And so that would have been a necessity. I'll just read to you. Actually, I put this on Twitter, so I'll read this thing. It's from Herbert Marcuse in 1972, in a book called Counter Revolution and Revolt. And I don't know who knows who Herbert Marcuse is, but he was basically the architect of what we call the New Left, which means all this crap that's going on now, as it existed in the 1960s, going into the 1970s, and has now gone on steroids. He's basically the guy who cooked it all up through the 60s. And so in 72, he writes this book, Counter Revolution and Revolt, and he says this. He says the radical refusal, which means the radical refusal of our whole society, the radical refusal to protest appears in the way in which words are grouped and regrouped, freed from their familiar use and abuse. Alchemy of the word, the image, the sound, creation of another reality out of the existing one, permanent imaginary revolution, emergence of a second history within the historical continuum, permanent aesthetic subversion. This is the way of art. That's their idea. That's their mission. That's their goal. So their architect in the 70s was saying, oh yeah, let's divorce words from the regular meanings and make people play in a second reality that we're under control of. So absolutely, the goal would have been to pressure the judges or the lawyers or whoever else is involved. We're going to disbar you if you don't use the language that we want you to use the way we want you to use it. We're going to, whatever it happens to be. So the goal has definitely been to control the linguistic terrain. The 90% of their manipulations that aren't outright bullying are just control of the linguistic terrain, using words that have two meanings. Common tactic I could bring up is to take a word with a specialized meaning, like say diversity. They know it has a special meaning. They know it means formally trained experts in racism or something like that, or critical race theorists, in other words. They know it has a specialized meaning. You don't know it has a specialized meaning, and they're on the committee and they say, well, let's put the word diversity as a goal in our thing. And so then you say, okay, and then it gets voted into policy. And the second it's now voted into policy, wham, specialized meaning comes out. Oh, we agreed that we're going to do diversity, and this is what diversity really means. And they trick people. They literally trick people this way over and over and over and over again, because people believe that they assume. I have a guy that's written some stuff for me at New Discourses, actually a book that's coming out soon through New Discourses called Counter Wokecraft, and he calls this technique using crossover terminology. The technique specifically he calls a reverse Mott and Bailey Trojan horse, but the way it works is through these things he calls crossover terms or crossover words. So diversity is a crossover word, because why on earth would you ever ask for a specific definition? They say, oh, let's add diversity to this. And we're like, oh, I know what that means. I'm not going to look like an idiot and ask what it means. But then
there's only one word that's called diversity. It's like, well,
right. And so that's,
well, what kind do you mean?
That's their goal, is to control that linguistic terrain, which is why I go around and I speak. And it was really fortunate, it turns out I'm not Christian. So I end up in these rooms full of Christians all the time, and they're praying and doing all this stuff. And so I went to give a talk at this one place, and it started with an invocation, and the guy prays. And the first thing he prays for is discernment. And this is a term that the Christians are really in love with for good reason, to be able to discern good from evil. They believe the devil is very wily and will trick you. He is in fact the deceiver, with a capital D. And so they're always praying for discernment, for wisdom, for clarity, for understanding, to be able to discern what's in front of them. And I realized that is actually how do you beat communists? It's discernment. That's how. Their programs are incredibly unpopular. Nobody will tolerate them for very long once they realize what's going on. But the trick is they seize power and have you trapped in some administrative or bureaucratic BS, so you can't get them out of power, by using tricky language or tricky little manipulations that if you were more discerning, you wouldn't fall for. And so going out and exposing these linguistic manipulations is a very effective tool. The more people who realize that the reason that they want to refer to the people that Rittenhouse shot in self-defense as victims is because it frames the entire thing. It also, therefore, of course, increases the semantic range of the word victim to include victim of. The question naturally becomes, victim of what? A victim of right-wing violence, of course. Well, what's right-wing violence? Anytime a right-winger does anything, and so this is the game. And
you can take it off course. Like, it's no longer about, which is exactly what happened. It doesn't matter who these people are, what their beliefs were, what party they would be assigned to, were they wearing an American flag or cargo shorts or not? Like, none of that matters. It's like the act, was it self-defense or not? Everyone has seen that tape. It was very clear to me when I saw it.
Right.
And so, taking away words like victim, it's like you can't steadily steer that into, well, he's a right winger, and
correct. And so it's like,
very sneaky.
law has always been better than most other. Now, I know enough lawyers to know about all their sneaky tricks and their dirty little games they play with each other and how they play their own word games and their own traps. I know you lawyers. But besides that, it tends to be very clear. If you've ever signed like a contract, like, a book contract or whatever, for example, or a producer contract or whatever, it says, your name, and you maybe even have to fill it in other words, hereafter referred to as the client.
Yep.
And it becomes very sterile in terms of everything. And the goal is actually to remove as much of that sauce on the language as possible. But to see that a judge has ruled that, basically what he ruled is, I'm not going to cede the linguistic terrain to activists in this courtroom. In the present environment we've been under for the last 5 to 10 years is a huge step. Because here's another trick with it. Every one of those little concessions, can I call them victims, seems like a tiny little concession, right? I prefer to see them that way. Can I call them? It seems like all right, you can, whatever. It seems like a tiny little thing to give away. But that's how I hate to sound weird, but that's how they get you. They give you.
Yeah, that's what's been happening the whole time, is so many tiny little giveaways.
Yeah.
Like, all right, sure. Of course, people can transition. Sure. It's like, all right, well, now if I identify as something a different day, like we've all seen the TikToks of the people that are like, well, I'm trans one day and then she the next day. And like, and how many bathrooms do we need now? It's like it's incremental to the point where, right, you've lost all power. Your reality has fundamentally changed.
Yeah, and so I hate to be like a dickhead, but the truth is, well, I don't really, but
Be
the
a
truth,
dick.
yeah. Well, what am I going to do? The truth is that, and I'm not saying that this is the same thing that's happening around Chappelle, right? So Chappelle made a statement and he even said, this has nothing to do with the LGBT community. That's how he phrases it. He says, it has nothing to do with them. People there are beautiful. They support this. They're nice. They're kind. They reach out. They understand. This has to do with a small segment of very radical activists. And I'll be much more frank, who are drunk on the idea of attention and affirmation. And so when you empower that, and nobody will, you disengage every possible way for somebody to say no. That's where you're going to have like, oh, I'm trans. And people are like, okay, like whatever. And maybe there's some kerfuffle around the edges. And then they're like, oh, well, on Tuesdays, I go by these pronouns, and Wednesdays, I go by these pronouns.
I have all these different bracelets, and you have to memorize the colors.
And you have to like different beads and different colors. Yeah. And you have to memorize this, and whatever one is on the outside, not the inside. These are just complicated attention getting rituals is what they are. They're just manipulative little tools. And Chappelle's mostly correct. The broad thing that doesn't really even need to exist under a coalition style acronym, LGBT, QI +2, whatever, all the stuff, hot dog emoji, whatever's in there.
Unicorn, yeah.
hashtag, yeah, hashtag unicorn poop. And whatever it is, like this broader community, the alphabet soup community, if you will, isn't well represented by attention whoring grifters within their ranks, who are the ones who are the least tolerant. They won't accept. Okay, in fact, they find it insulting if the attitude was, "Oh, you're trans? Okay, cool." And you can think of like a spoiled teenager, right, who comes out. You can imagine. I'm sure this happened many times in the last decade. Some teenager dramatically comes out to their parents, "I'm gay," and it's like, "All right." And then, you don't love me because you didn't get mad, that kind of a reaction.
Like, and I'm gay. It's like, all right, you still have to eat all your beans. Like,
yeah,
right,
like,
what do you want for dinner?
Cool, we got the trash. Like,
yeah,
that's your chores. We're busy, good for you. And it's like, you didn't get, but the specific reaction, you don't love me because you didn't get mad about it. Like, that's the sort of thing that which is a teenager idiot thing. Like, whatever, teenagers are teenagers. But that shouldn't be being empowered in adults, and it shouldn't be encouraged in teenagers who are given this kind of pathway to like infinite, not just attention, but affirmation through this sort of manipulation, which tears the whole thing down. And, again, Chappelle's correct about the entire analysis and the entire so-called community. I don't like making coalitions and communities because then there's representatives and views and whatever. But if we take it with a grain of salt, the whole like alphabet community then runs into the problem that those people become the representatives, and then the whole like people. I got in trouble with this talking about Jews, so holy shit, let's be careful. My point is reactionaries tend not to be super nuanced. And so the reactionary people who are going to be the ones who end up gay bashing or something as a result of being frustrated over this are doing it out of misplaced anger that's sloppy and completely unjust. There's nothing that you can possibly respect in this. So I don't want anybody to be confused on my position. But it's very likely because they have this extreme misplaced frustration at people who are blatantly not well and grifting off of it and manipulating we all kind of have this detente, this agreement, like, let's not punch down, right? If we perceive that somebody gets a rougher ride in life, let's not punch down on those people. And then there are people who are grifting off of that agreement and ruining it for everybody. And the people, same thing happens with the Jews. The people who are going to get victimized for it are people who deserve it least. And in the case of the Jews, it's visible Jews. It's people who are Orthodox and dress visibly as Jews end up getting beat up in the street because of misplaced anger that's at a specific group of people acting in a specific way, probably communists who happen to be Jewish, and which is, it turns out you can do that. And then the visible Orthodox Jew who's just going about his life is the one who gets punched in the head over this misplaced anger from a reactionary idiot. And same. And this is just a terrible thing to be feeding in all regards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you made a really good point about like who are the sort of trans representatives right now, and it's like, right, what's going to get you noticed is like, do you have the most kind of insane looking TikTok? Like, are you attention getting to look at? Like, are the person who's covered in piercings and colored hair and like very out there is going to get more views than like a Buck Angel who is like, older, a little more measured, a little more wise. But it's like the Buck Angels should be the representatives for the trans community. The Blair Whites should be the representatives for the trans community. And it's like, you look at kind of like who is being pushed. Like, okay, if I were trying to sell transgenderism, right, who would I sell it to? It's just like, I'm trying to make it like an example of like, okay, I notice all the propaganda and everything that's coming at like our young people and all this drama over like, can we put our kids on hormones? And like, and maybe like it gets like teenagers thinking, do I need to be on hormones? It's like, no, I was a tomboy. Like I was very like, when I was younger, like you probably could have convinced me to start going on hormones because I was flat. I really liked sports. Like I wasn't into boys for many years. But it's kind of clever. It's like if you are pushing as many people to be trans as possible, yeah, I think you would start with the younger, more impressionable folks. And in my opinion, that kind of looks like is what's going on. Is going on. And it's like, and these kids are also like, and by kids, I mean like really anybody under 35, but like, and these are also your representatives, but they also have all the hallmarks of like just being young and dumb and like not thinking things through. So it's like you have all the worst qualities.
That's right.
People that maybe should be, some of them in therapy, working things out. And instead of just like
the grooming in the schools, the grooming. I mean, I don't know if you know the definition of queer in queer theory. Most people know one of these crossover terms. You don't question
it's not anyone who just says yes. That was my
That's right. Yeah. It's trisexual. I'll try anything once.
Yeah.
That old joke. No, it means queer is defined as an identity without an essence. So imagine like pumping this into, say, middle school kids or even younger, 8-year-olds. The idea that your identity, you have there's such a thing as an identity without an essence. And that if you don't have that, if you're not working toward that, then you're somehow probably upholding some binary, some cis heteropatriarchy, something evil you're complicit in, unless you're heading toward, literally by definition, a complete identity crisis. Now, if you want to be like an adult, 18's good enough. Mentally, not really, but whatever. If you're an adult and you want to trend toward an identity without an essence, more power to you. But this is not something that likely, if you were to just backtrack 10 years and like go to a developmental psychologist who's not completely cooked in the noodle right now, if you went to a developmental psychologist and said, what would you say about taking 8-year-olds or 12-year-olds and encouraging them to de-essentialize their identity? Do you think that's developmentally sound practice? I'm pretty sure you would find virtually unanimous agreement that this is a horrifically bad idea, that the struggles, whatever they happen to be for children, to figure out, adolescents in particular, to figure out who they are in the world is already more than hard enough, and that what's going on with their capacity to engage in abstract reasoning and to picture themselves as what they are and what they want to be in the future it's not only not developed, it's developing. And so that if you poison that at that stage, I bet you they would tell you you're going to do, as Abigail Schreier phrased it, irreparable damage. And what did they do with that? Well, they banned that book from all kinds of places. And then the ACLU guy, the Strangio guy, who is a very Strangio looking person, said that it should be burned or something like that. Like an ACLU, I'm going to say lawyer hesitantly, came out and said that the book should be burned. Like, holy moly. Like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah. It's pretty crazy. I think back to control, right? And like the hormone thing, like I think back to like the biggest mistake I would have made in high school would be like getting a tattoo. And now it's like the biggest mistake you can make in high school is like getting convinced to cut off your dick when you're just maybe going through a phase, like, or like taking
double mastectomy. Why not?
Doing irreparable damage. Yeah. And then you're like, that's the rest of your life that's determined by like a few years of going through it, of dealing, which we all go through it,
a few years in which the entire, like, it is literally the running joke of society that those few years, and I mean probably since antiquity, that those few years are a bit famous for bad decision making.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I was, needed the money I did, it's like the where you got like the female gremlin and a little bit Yoda or whatever. Young I was, needed the money I did.
Yeah, be like, I don't know, I was on Craigslist, I didn't mean it. This is so interesting. We're talking about like impressing upon language what you want, or like impressing upon kids and their thoughts what you want. This was a great example. You retweeted it, James. It's from my thin-formed MKE.
Myth-informed Milwaukee.
I can't read
Milwaukee. That's everybody is always talking to me about him. They're like, who's that Mike guy? And I'm like, what? And they're like, the one with the MKE. Myth-informed Milwaukee.
Now it makes sense. According to this teacher educator, toddlers have a unique sense of what is fair and just in this world. Hence, they are ready for deep conversations about racial topics, despite not knowing what race means. Indoctrination of kids and starts in preschool. I'm going to rewind this back.
I wonder what you say to teachers who say, oh, gosh, but my kids is preschool. They're toddlers. We don't need to talk about difference. That'll just create differences. I just wonder what you say to those folks.
Yeah, I've actually had that question quite a bit. And I tell them, if you spend time with those children, they let you know justice and fairness are top of mind for them. I don't know if you've ever been in a room of toddlers. They will tell you what is fair and not fair. I taught 2-year-olds and they don't miss a beat. If you have one more than I have, I'm going to notice that. And they know why did she get to go in that area and I'm still over here? They'll come and ask you those things. So children very early on have a sense of what is fair in the world and what is just and how do you make things right. So for folks who shy away from that conversation, I say, yes, but if you listen to the children, they're telling you they're ready for these kinds of conversations.
They're telling you, James.
And they may not know the word race, but they do know differences. They do know justice. They have a sense of that. And when it comes to race, if you want to be explicit in that, right, talk about race with young children, part of that is being prepared for that conversation. I remember getting ready to be, when I was a classroom teacher, getting ready for children to ask me why my skin was darker than theirs.
So I wonder what you...
First of all, her name is Dr. Nicole Russell. She can't even spell her own first name. It's Nicol. So that for me was my first red flag. And then she says, oh, well, this kid is wondering, why am I in the corner and this kid's not? It's like, yeah, because you hit your classmate with a frying pan. Like, kids are not.
I was going to say
things, but they don't.
I was going to ask you if it's okay if I swear on your podcast.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, here's the truth that the Dr. Russell doctor is overlooking is that kids are fucking stupid. We don't want 2-year-olds organizing society. They can tell what's fair and not fair. Let me tell you how that works. It turns out I will use the word precocious for myself as a young man, as a child. And I had this running scam that I finally got the shit beat out of me for when my parents figured out what I was doing. And I had this running scam on my brother where I could give him 2 $1 bills and trade it for his $10 bill every time. Look how not fair it is. I have 2, you have 1. You want to trade? Yes. Every time. Because it turns out he didn't understand what the numbers on the bills represented. He just knew how many there were. We don't want, and he was like not a toddler, and he's also like a fucking rocket scientist. He's not stupid. And so we don't actually, I know this is like news in 2021 to people with doctorates, but we don't actually want toddlers organizing society. Delayed gratification, that's not a thing yet. Understanding that what's going on, having a functional theory of mind, none of that's happening. The toddlers are literally, by definition, if you graded them on the adult scale, total sociopaths. Yeah. And also dumb as rocks, like IQ 4.
If a toddler drops an ice cream and starts crying because it's unfair, it's like, well, yeah, that toddler doesn't understand gravity, but in their mind, that's unfair. Like
that's right. My mom,
somebody in your comments mentioned, like, yeah, children also go to other kids' birthday parties and are upset that they are not also getting presents. It's
that's like correct. That's not fair. They don't know. It's like when I was a toddler. Not that I'm gonna like, haha, like what a cool, smart guy I was ripping off my brother. When I was a toddler, like if I fell down, like my mom had to come over and like yell at the curb that I tripped over, the rock or whatever.
Really?
Like, like to make me feel better, like because I was a stupid little shit. Because I was a toddler, and it turns out that this is, we're joking around Dr. Russell here, doctor, who has this completely dumbass idea that she's using, and it turns out that this is deep in their mentality. Like there's a book written in 1970, I think, called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. When I say I think, I mean plus or minus 2 years on one side or the other of 1970, written by Paulo Freire, a Brazilian Marxist who destroyed their education system completely with his crackpot ideas. And he has like literally an entire chapter. It's only 4 chapters in the book. One of the entire chapters is talking about the need to get away from the idea of teachers and students, because that's a power dynamic, obviously, and you can't have power. We have to get to where we mix them together and have teachers who see themselves as students and students who see themselves as teachers. And it's all this kind of one big morass where the children are now dictating the curriculum. Now we have this big fight in Loudoun County. Who gets to pick the curriculum? Apparently not the parents. But part of their answer is, what do the children want? And you think, no, that's ridiculous, right? No, it's not ridiculous. It's exactly how our universities got dragged off into diversity hell to the degree that they did. If you ask administrators, why did you do all this DEI crap? They'll tell you almost to a man that it was a bottom-up desire from students.
What is DEI? Is that
diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like they said it was bottom-up. That means the students came in and demanded it, and our student services offices recommended it, so we went with it. The reason is because they financially trapped themselves by building lots of infrastructure like new stadiums, bowling alleys, movie theaters, new $50 million, business classroom building that they didn't need, like crazy billions and billions of dollars in mortgages on these campuses to attract students in this weird arms race that happened after everybody could get a student loan that's federally underwritten, which was a Clinton decision. And they started competing for that infinite amount of federally underwritten money, and the student services arms race was the thing. And so now you're in here like could you imagine the idea that you're going to run a business you're going to run a school, and you're going to run it so much like a business that you think, oh, well, what the kids want to learn is what we should do. I mean, that's like a Beastie Boys music video or something like that, like an obvious parody of reality, but that's what the aim is. So here we have Dr. Russell, who's like, oh, listen to toddlers. They know all about fairness and justice because they're so perspicacious at 2 fucking years old. They know all about it. They know the words perspicacious too. They said it, and then they said freedom right afterwards.
Yeah.
Who knew?
If you can't keep yourself from swallowing Legos, then yeah, you shouldn't be deciding.
Yeah, that's right. I'm in total agreement with that. Like total agreement that if you're crawling on the floor, sniffing around for Parmesan cheese or crumbs or rocks or whatever it happens to be, and that you shouldn't be making decisions that you don't actually understand. a judge used to be something that you would hold in extraordinarily high esteem in every society, like ever. And who are they? What's your archetype? If I said, picture a judge, what do you picture? Probably an older person. Yes, definitely a white man but older, more mature, somebody who's been around the courtroom or whatever in law for many decades.
I picture Judge Judy, actually. That would be my ideal.
There we go. Yeah, well, that's an ideal judge because she doesn't
She'd
put
be
up
like,
with it.
Don't piss on me and tell me it's raining.
That's right. Yeah. But that's the thing is we picture somebody who's like really been around and thought through some things and is mature in their thought. Turns out you probably didn't think of a toddler.
No.
Right? No.
Yeah. They're not
because the toddler
wise.
is like going to be hitting the dog with the gavel immediately.
Yeah. It's this letting, and I don't know if it's pressure or it's like a generational thing of like, and it's what these teachers are saying. I feel like it just, I don't know, it ties into how I think I see a lot of kids being parented, like this hands off, like, oh, like I remember when I'd hear about like Montessori schools and like, oh, we just let them, I'm picturing like free range kids just wandering around. We let them decide like what to study. And it's like, what? It's like, why are we letting go of responsibility and like, just parental obligations over like, being nice. It's like boys, girls, everyone does better with more structure, with knowing what the expectations are. I used to work in a school. It's like, you're in charge, man. You're the adult. You're the parent.
I mean, look at dating even with adults. It's like, don't play games, right? Everybody just wants to know the damn rules. Like, okay, you don't want me to call you when your husband's around. I got you. Whatever the rules are. People just want to know what the rules are. And the same kind of thing here. People actually, children especially, because turns out their rational capacity for abstract thought has not fully developed. Need boundaries because the likelihood that they're in general going to be able to work out the proper boundaries for themselves well is pretty low. So you actually you optimize the situation that they're in by not letting them be free range and decide everything for themselves. Like if you just let kids decide, if you actually looking at the polls, if you just let kids study whatever they wanted to study, every single one of them will be studying TikTok videography because they all want to be viral on TikTok.
That's all what they want to be when they grow up. Like there's a poll I read where like the number one like job that these high school girls wanted to do when they grow up was just have OnlyFans. Like that's it. So that's a little alarming. And it's just, it's scary that we can see somebody that just because they have a DR in front of their name, they're allowed to totally put what they want onto these kids, which they're basically blank slates, and like she has an agenda and she is like reading what she wants into these behaviors and they're just sort of nodding like, yes, this is all this is the cultural wokeness that we're all subscribing to. And like, yeah, we need to shape the youth. It's just, like my sister's a teacher. I think she's one of the good ones, but I see more and more teachers who I feel like are just a little too hungry for influence, a little too hungry for control. And everyone's really kind of, their eyes are being opened to it now with this just mass participation in school board meetings and just parents getting upset. And you had a really great episode come out recently where you're talking about these language manipulations that happened and how you have to be really vigilant about keeping on top of what's being taught in your kids' school. And that's just one example. It's kind of all over the culture, but you're responding to this like, oh, teachers will say, well, we're not teaching critical race theory. We're not teaching it. And you're like, no, correction. Like you're doing it. You are actually doing it. Like you might like mince the words a little bit, but it's like, it is actually going on. And you were telling people what to look for, like look for words like equity, look for phrases like white privilege. Like it's not about what they're saying. Now. Yeah. It's about what concepts and ideas they're teaching. And that sounds like something you need to constantly stay on top of. Like, I don't think my parents, when I was in school, like even looked into what we were being taught. But again, like every generation has its problems that are kind of,
9 times out of 10, like when I took geometry, we did geometry. Right. And so 9 times out of 10, when our parents didn't need to look very hard because we could actually still trust the institutions to a degree. The problem that they weren't catching was this emphasis on feelings. you said, where did this come from? It turns out that, the answer to where did this come from is Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who, just to kind of oversimplify, one of the biggest philosophers of the last 500 years, one of his many kind of strange, damaging beliefs, his counter-enlightenment beliefs, was that sincerity is a better arbiter of truth than reason, logic, and evidence. He thought that reason was too sterile, and so, but instinct and emotion is too raw, and so that there's this thing in between that's like sincerity. And so if you sincerely express something, say, I don't know, it may be the fact that only 9 unarmed Black people were killed by police in 2019, but it feels like to me that it's murder on the streets every day. That sincerity is like this, and that's what Dr. Russell was ultimately appealing to. I don't know whether she's ever read a word of Rousseau, I don't know, but that idea has come down to where she's like, look at and another idea with Rousseau is the noble savage, which is the noble child now in this context. Look at what the noble toddler already knows. The toddler already has intrinsic instinctual understandings of fairness and justice that exceed those that have been poisoned in us by our racist capitalist system. And so they're ready for these conversations already. Look how noble, the child is. And then what's coming out of that is they're so sincere in the way that they, this wasn't fair. She has 2 and I have 1. That's not fair. Well, maybe the kid that got 2 did something to earn 2, but
yeah, maybe you're in the corner because you hit somebody, and
yeah.
Oh, well, he hit them because, of equity and,
yeah. So,
whatever.
I mean, so it turns out there are actually deep, ugly philosophical roots for even this complete idiocy that we see from the good doctor.
Doctor. Yeah.
Doctor.
Anybody can be a doctor now.
I keep thinking I want to give my PhD back. Like, can I just not have one now? It's embarrassing.
You're Dr. James? You're Dr. James?
I am Dr. James.
I should have introduced you as Dr. James Lindsay. I'm so sorry.
No, it would be embarrassing now.
From Michael Henley, great job in Nashville, Chrissy. You are cracking the dam, standing for your principles. This is for your equipment upgrades, or at least more duct tape. Thank you, Michael. I had packed all my podcasting equipment, 2 laptops, literally everything I own that's expensive into one bag that the airline lost. Like I arrived in New York, and then I got this text like, oh, sorry, like your one bag that you checked didn't make it. And I'm like, that has my whole life in it. And it just finally, they were like, oh, it never left Nashville. And I'm like, oh God, this is horrible. So, but anyway, I got it a couple hours ago, which is why we're doing this podcast. Yay.
Yay. I had a bag debacle earlier this year at the beginning of July, coming back from Los Angeles. It was a thing.
Yeah.
It was a thing.
I was like, are they taking it because they know who I am? And then I was like, get over yourself, Chrissy. Nope.
Yeah, that's how I basically believe that, like, every time now. I'm like, they know me. Actually, they do know me because I like flown so much. I have status on the airline now, and sometimes I get on the plane and it's like I even have a mask on because they make me. And like the flight attendant will know who I am.
Whoa.
And I'm like, what?
Hello, Mr. Lindsay.
That's right. That's right. Well, no, not quite that part. Like, thank you for having spent like $20,000 on our airline this year, or more than that, probably a lot more than that, actually.
Which one have you picked to like be? Because I'm at the point where I'm like, oh yeah, I should just stay loyal to like one airline for the most part.
That's what you have to do. And it turns out that years ago I picked United, so I'm a United super loyalist, and now I have reaped the rewards of that in
points.
I have status and points. Yeah, I have a lot of points.
What is United's stance on like jabbing its employees? Because I think Delta sort of gave that up.
Yeah, Delta's looking good. I might have to go status shopping with Delta, because I think United is like, their CEO seems to be the most in on all of this crazy shit of all the airline CEOs. American. I mean, I picked United in 2014 and have just ridden the same pony ever since. So it's like these decisions are making me uncomfortable and upset. I'm a very, it turns out, pathologically loyal person, and so it's like I will literally take a layover flight on United to get somewhere that I could get a direct flight because it's a hub on another airline. Like, yeah. I live in Knoxville. I have flown on United to Atlanta, which is a Delta hub, in 3 hours. I've taken like a 6-hour flight to get to
Wow.
Atlanta because like, no, I'm going to stick with my airline. Pathologically, like I said, loyal. I only did that once, but pathologically loyal. And it's like, well, if you're going to mandate all this crazy shit with your employees and, whatever, and is it going to be me next, like as a passenger? Like if you're going to do that, then I'm more than happy to start status shopping around. Turns out if you're a high status on an airline inside baseball, and you tell the other airlines this, sometimes they will give you fast tracks to status or just give you status.
Ooh.
Because otherwise they know they have no chance of getting your business. Because
Yeah.
right now, like if I book a flight on United, it's like north of 90% chance I'm riding first class, even though I bought an economy ticket because I'm high status.
Oh,
So why on
interesting.
earth would I ever fly on a different airline if I have the choice? So they know that, so they'll match your status. So I'm considering like a loyalty shift of something like that, where I've entrenched for 7 years now. This is who I fly with. A loyalty shift for a person like me is significant. It's the weight of the politics that are happening around these kind of idiotic mandates that they're trying to shove down our throats.
Yeah. I'm starting to be loyal to like American Airlines because I was just like, American, that sounds nice, but I will probably have to bail and find somebody else if they I actually kind of don't know where they're at with jabbing their employees, but
Well, they had the freedom flu, so it's up in the air right now. Those puns everywhere.
we everywhere. I want to get to a couple of these other super chats. Oh, a lot of fans of yours here.
Hello, fans of mine.
So many fans. From Little Ragamuffin, the dam needs constant maintenance or it will erode and break down again. The more people working to keep the dam strong, the easier it is to keep the woke waters under control. Ooh, so many creative metaphors. I like it.
That's right. That's the other dam, though. That's
Vigilance.
our dam.
Yeah. We have a dam.
That's a dam against them. We have a better dam.
We
sure basically have the Hoover Dam of dams.
From Nicholas Blackledge, please give James Only Subs a plug. The content on there is insightful and entertaining.
So yeah, it turns out I have two podcasts. I have a real one, the New Discourses podcast. They're both real, but I have a New Discourses podcast that's public. Everybody can. It's just accessible for everybody on all the favorite platforms. It's called the New Discourses podcast. You can go find it on newdiscourses.com if you don't know how else to find it on your own favorite thing. But I have a subscribers only or contributors only podcast that I do called Only Subs, where I virtually never plan them. I just get something in my head that I want to talk about, talk to the microphone exactly where you see me sitting right now for anywhere between 5 and 30 minutes usually. And sometimes they're total rants. Sometimes they're pretty like experimental ideas or stuff I'm thinking about. And it's a different kind of thing. So if you subscribe and contribute on any of your favorite platforms to me, then you get access to those and early access to the other podcast. So that's the plug. And I called it James Lindsay Only Subs because because my web guy who came up with this really funny.
Only Subs kind of sounds like a place where you would post your thirst traps, like your intellectual PhD.
Well, OnlyFans actually tried to recruit me.
What? Really?
They did. They wanted me to be.
They're like, James, you have a nice body. Get over here.
Well, she didn't say that. Which now I'm pissed about. No, but she was
thinking it.
Some OnlyFans chick slid into, like, not like a performer, but like a company woman slid into my DMs and was like, "Hey, you're like an influencer. Do you want to be an influencer on OnlyFans? We'll give you a better percentage than average or whatever." Blah blah blah. And I was like, I don't really need more paywalls in my life. And so now, though, I have people, because occasionally I make the mistake of. Back in the day, I don't know what possessed me, but I thought it'd be funny to joke. Like, I had it on my bio on Twitter for a long time that I was an aspiring underwear model.
Ooh.
And so I've made this joke enough time where people are actually trying to encourage me to like read woke stuff in my underwear on an OnlyFans, but I probably won't do it.
I think that would get definitely attention from a different crowd. Grab them with your body, and then they'll
there's
stay
the
and
moms. There's the moms. But no, I also used to comment that I'm big with the gays. So I would have we'll say raging gay army behind me in every regard, for sure. And not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, I would love
that's a 90s I'm watch Seinfeld joke.
Oh yeah. I'm rewatching all of Seinfeld now with my boyfriend, and I have a newfound appreciation for it for sure. Because like
Oh, it's
when I was
funny.
younger, I was like, oh, that's the show that my sister likes, and I'd be like, eh. I mean, but I've also really observed that the only character I really like or would be friends with is Kramer. Everyone else is like really kind of a prick, like
That's
just
the
really
idea. They're all
douchey.
supposed to
Yeah.
be totally neurotic, and then Kramer's just a total out there, goofball.
Once I saw that he
Good show.
waited outside and like watched Elaine's, like what was it? This big wardrobe thing that she was trying to get. Like he sat outside and watched it. I'm like, that's a good person. Like he's my favorite.
Yep.
That's a ride or
Yep.
die right there. From Vapor Trails, James, you're a hero, the most important public intellectual in the world today. Seriously. Saw you at YAF. Are you getting through to any politicians? You are doing what the GOP think tanks are supposed to be doing, but aren't. Wow. High praise.
That is high praise. I am getting through to some GOP politicians, as a matter of fact, both at the state level in many different states, as a matter of fact, and at the federal level. I can't name names or do anything like that, but I did recently spend a little bit of time in person with a handful of GOP representatives and a few GOP senators. And so they knew who I was in some cases before I knew who they were.
Ooh.
So I am getting through to politicians. I think even more so at the state level than at the federal level. I don't quite know my reputation with Congress, but certainly when I travel from state to state to state, it's typical at this point that I'll either meet with state legislators or that state legislators will come to one of my talks to listen to me or whatever, and we'll talk. And so, I could name a significant number of states where that's already occurred and will probably occur again.
Wow. Okay. I was going to ask like how you began the process of having these conversations with them, but right, you said they come to your talks. Like, do any of them ever reach out to you, or is it mostly you?
Yeah, that actually does happen sometimes. I've had a few slide into my DMs. I've had some call me up. They get my number from somebody, call me up on the telephone. We chit chat. We talk about this. We talk about that. We
Ooh.
talk about the other thing. I don't actually. It turns out, in general, I'm just not a very forward guy. I don't start a lot of conversations. So I don't tend to go up to these people and grab them. Like Ron DeSantis. I know he's a governor, but I need to preach to you about critical race theory for like the 15.8 seconds that you're going to tolerate me being in your presence. I don't tend to do that. And so the conversations have largely been that they recognize, due to the work, the volume of stuff that I put out and the quality, I hope, that I have something to offer. I mean, for example, speaking of podcasts, like the one we're doing now, I actually went on a congressman's podcast. Not that
Congressmen
long
have
ago.
podcasts? Wow.
Oh yeah, most of them do, or lots of them do. I went on Andy Biggs. He's an Arizona representative. I went on Andy Biggs's podcast. We talked Marx, we talked Hegel, we talked deep philosophy. The guy's on it. So his office reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to go on his podcast. So yeah, getting through a little bit.
That's really cool. That makes me kind of respect him a bit more, because it's like, yeah, you're getting with it. If you want to reach out to people, podcasts are kind of the way.
I mean, yeah, I actually have this really weird relationship with podcasts and social media, like in terms of how I think about them. And it's almost like prayer. Like you're trying to petition the powers that be with your ideas, but it turns out that, other people are listening. And so it tends to actually get attention. Content is king. If you're putting out hopefully decent stuff that's interesting to people, that speaks to something that they're interested in hearing, you too could be heard by a congressman or the president, maybe maybe not this president.
No,
but
he just
maybe the last one.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he would be retweeting a ton of people.
He retweeted me.
What? Oh my God. You should have that printed and like framed in your bathroom.
No, they came after me, right? And speaking of
Oh.
like Dave Chappelle and not bending the knee, they came after me and they were like, you have to denounce him now. And I did not denounce President Trump over that. I wasn't a fan even at the time, but I just thought it was funny that it happened. And he retweeted me and they said, you have to denounce him. And I changed my name on Twitter to James Lindsay, retweeted by the president, instead of denouncing him.
I think I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, that happened. Yeah, that was a thing.
What was the tweet that he retweeted of you?
I said something along the lines of whenever I hear the words peaceful protesters from the media, I don't believe it, and that's a problem, or something like that. Like I just think I just assume it's a lie or something. And it was totally like not that interesting. It wasn't like a Trump bombastic,
It was like observation, like a simple, honest truth. Yeah.
It wasn't like, best of luck to my haters and losers, or anything like that.
Yeah. Or like calling any chicks like that they look like a man or something. Like,
well, I mean, some
spicy.
Of them do. Well, I did say that Hannah Gadsby looks like Dilbert.
Yeah, that's pretty apt though. From Charles Thompson, I think it's a mistake to confuse wokeness with communism. It is both older. It is both older than communism, and communists would never tolerate wokeness. Interesting.
That's a complicated point that could be the entire podcast, but yes, that is actually correct. Wokeness is, in some regards, depending on which aspects of it you're talking about, older. But that said, the thing that we refer to as wokeness is actually like wokeness refers to, yes, I know it's Gnosticism at its base, which goes all the way back, but it refers to having awakened to critical consciousness. What people don't understand often is that Marxism itself is a form of Gnosticism that is it is the modern era in reinvention of Gnostic thought. So in the pre-modern era and the superstitious religious era before the modernity came into being in the 16th and 17th centuries. Before then, Gnostics believed it was all these kind of occult kind of beliefs. It was very spiritual, blah, blah, blah. Then Marx came along, and with the same underlying architecture, which he derived largely from Hegel, with the same underlying architecture, he decided that there's a new kind of consciousness called class consciousness. That's this new kind of awareness that he called Soviet science, or socialist man was another thing that he referred to. It's not Soviet. I always say Soviet. It's socialist. The socialist science and the scientific socialism. And he even talked about socialist man. You have to be socialist man to understand it, which means that you have this new awakened consciousness where you're raging, but it's Gnostic because you're raging against the world. You feel like you were flung into unfairly, and that God is not God, but God is actually a jailer. And so what it did was it appropriated all the ideas of scientific thought and turned it scientistic and created this whole new belief system. So when we march down the way, Marxism gives way to cultural Marxism, gives way to neo-Marxism, gives way to identity Marxism, and identity Marxism is what we call wokeness. It's the same underlying architecture. Now, that said, communists definitely reject it, because Workers of the World Unite is an anti-racial idea. And critical race theory, for example, certainly is like everybody has to have their racial consciousness. But that's why there was a book written by Charles Mills, a leading theorist in there, about white Marxism and critical race theory that he called From Class to Race, where it's been transmorgified into a new context. So it depends. That's the long answer. The short answer is yes, but it depends on what you mean by communism. Because the same underlying architecture, that there's a utopian vision, they now call it justice instead of communism. They called it liberation in the 60s. And they still use that word, but justice is the more common catchphrase. That there's this utopian thing that we can get to from our present freedom state, which is secretly oppressive. So this is the belief structure. Freedom is inherently secretly oppressive, but if we administer an economy that redistributes things appropriately, the way that by science or by logic or whatever, by the Gnostic understanding of the consciousness, then it will eventually become spontaneous and automatic. And then we're going to have communism or justice or liberation or whatever. That 3-step process to get from secretly oppressive freedom to a liberated utopia is the same architecture you see in wokeness. That's why they push for establishing by decree, by institutional mandate, equity programs, which is the same as the socialist program of yore. We're going to redistribute now power and privilege more than material resources, and then and means of production. And then if that is enforced long enough to become spontaneous, then we're going to enter into a justice phase, racial justice, where this happens spontaneously, and we're now in a properly, truly post-racial era, or a classless, stateless society where class is understood as race, because it becomes redundant. So it depends on what you mean by communism. This is an evolution of communism into identity politics. But there were like several, it's like Pokemon. There were like several stages to get to the final form.
The shiny versions, yeah, male, female versions. I played
Yeah,
Pokemon Go.
yeah. So the Turdmander, which is like that fire one, but in the toilet. That's the joke. I used to harass
a
the
new
children
one?
with that. No, I made that up, and I
Okay.
thought it was hilarious. And my children would go, like there's that
Oh,
thing.
like not Charmander, but Turdmander.
Yeah, exactly. Not
Okay.
Charmander, but Turdmander. And I thought it was the funniest thing ever. And it's like the kids hated it and got really mad, which then made it funnier for me. So it became like a perma troll. And like I even like I downloaded a picture of Charmander on the internet, like on the Pokemon Go when it came out. I've never even played this. I downloaded this picture and I'd like Microsoft Paint or whatever, no, not really. It was like GIMP or something. And I opened up and I changed the color to brown and I put like the poop emoji as like a hat on it. And
That's
I
cute.
juxtaposed it onto a picture I found on the internet of a toilet. And then it had like all their PowerPoints or whatever. And I took this picture and I sent it to my kids and they were like, ah!
Oh, that's really cute
Troll.
and clever.
I put like 2 hours into that picture.
Wow.
I suck at graphics.
You could have picked something like Diglett that already kind of looks like poop because it's just like two like little brown mounds that like pop out.
I don't know I don't know that much. Your
It's a
Pokemon lore exceeds mine by orders of magnitude. Turdmander, and it evolves. I told them into the corn-eyed brown snake.
Okay, that's good. That's very clever. I appreciate that.
And that's an old joke of 1980s yesteryear. Corn-eyed brown
joke.
snake.
It's a dad joke for sure.
Yeah,
it is interesting because to me it looks like it's just like whatever it is, the Marxism, communism, like modern day, right, wokeness, whatever you want to call it. To me, it's just like, well, this is the way it's found a way. Like the powers that be want to break apart America and the values we have, and it's just like I just feel like they've been trying to get it in somehow, and it's like, well, they found a way because it's like in vogue now. Sensitivity is like paramount, right? And respect. No, you have to know my pronouns, but really, it's like the sensitivity has sort of turned to now it's like bullying, and I think it's just this was the way it found in. Like, Occupy Wall Street kind of fell flat because I think they didn't want to acknowledge the class issue, but like racism, that's pretty spicy. Like that's something we can fire up and the public can fight about endlessly, but addressing like real, like the middle class being destroyed, right? I mean, I think that's getting more to like the crux of it.
That the woke thing was unleashed intentionally on the Occupy.
Yeah, I think I heard
make
that,
it fall
like,
flat, right? To
wow.
distract from the class issue, which had been made unavoidable.
Yeah.
Right.
That
Like,
makes
so
so much sense.
the Tea Party and Occupy have so much in common. The old school right wing and left wing populists, as it were, had so much in common. And if they only could have found common cause, well, one thing you really don't want to let them do is have that. So the Tea Party had to be all racists and they all had to be anti-racist. Then within, it was still too dangerous because Wall Street was there. And I don't know if you've read Vivek Ramaswamy's book, Woke Inc., but he talks about how the INC, like incorporated. Yeah. So he explains how the big financial institutions and other corporations that were involved in what happened in the collapse in 2008 going forward through 11 when we're looking at OWS, they realized that they could basically perform an abortion on the Occupy Wall Street. That's his phrasing. No, adoption. Put it up for adoption is how he phrased it, not abortion. Put up the Occupy Wall Street movement for adoption by bringing in woke values. And then what do you have? You have fucking Goldman Sachs sitting up there like, we're all committed to anti-racist and diversity, blah, blah, blah. And all the stupid leftists that are kind of like proto-woke at the time are like, yay, we love Goldman Sachs. Meanwhile, it's like everything in Occupy Wall Street is point of personal privilege. We're going to put we're going to put a progressive stack in here. So people of color are going to speak first, women of color before them. If you're white, please listen and learn in silence, or, some bull crap like that. They just ate the thing from and who was paying them? Probably freaking Goldman Sachs. Who was like paying somebody to show up and do that and make sure that those people are well funded and not going to miss it. Yeah, look at that. That's wokeness is the most potent divide and conquer scheme that's ever been unleashed on certainly free societies in the modern and postmodern eras. it's what it's for. And then they spent everybody 10 years. They spend getting everybody used to thinking this way. Divide. Then what? Now they interject into us two new identity categories, vaccinated and unvaccinated.
Yep.
And God, the hate across that line. Like, you don't think that's manufactured? Everybody down to now 5 years old, apparently, as of today, everybody has to be vaccinated. Everybody has to be vaccinated. We could just get out of this pandemic if the people who didn't would come around. Do you realize? Like, no, they do realize exactly what that push and that language. Oh, there's a way. Here's this terrible thing. It's really, really terrible. We're making sure it stays really, really terrible, and we could all be over.
Until we get everything we want. Until we get done everything we want. And then we'll let up. We'll give you your freedom back.
You create foot soldiers out of normal people that way.
Mm-hmm.
Make them want to go and socially enforce the idea that, say, medical exemptions aren't relevant, or religious exemptions are just selfish, or that, just making the decision between yourself and your doctor, or for yourself in spite of your doctor, is selfish and evil. And it's funny because people say, a lot of times people say to me, they say, well, it's so transparent that it's like not necessary given, 99.8% survival rate, whatever the statistics happen to be. And it's like, but don't you understand that psychologically it not making sense makes it stickier for the people that are turned into fanatics about it, because they don't have a rational explanation for it. So all they have is to like create really hyperbolic. Not like, I recently had somebody give me the explanation that everybody has to be vaccinated, because if we don't, 95% of the population will be dead within 5 years. And I was like, where did you hear that? And like, oh, it's just simple extrapolation from, and I was like, how is it extrapolation from 99.8% survive to 95% die? And then his magic talisman that he got to throw out to win the argument was variance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, you have an answer.
You mean just other types of flu, like the kinds we've been having since forever,
I got the flu, by the way. And I bring that up because only 2,000 people apparently did.
I remember you tweeted about that. You're like, turns out I have the regular ass flu.
Yeah. I really want to know, how did I travel literally like 70 times in the last year and not manage to get COVID, apparently, which maybe I did. I don't know. Maybe twice. Not managed to get COVID detectably anyway, at all, in all these trips, when 700 million people or whatever the number is got it. And then 2,000 people only got the flu. And somehow I managed to get that. Like, hang on.
Interesting. I got it last month.
The COVID? The coof?
Yeah. I wanted it. I was very curious about it. I was like, bring it on.
See, I think I may or may not have had it at 2 different times, but I got the cheap antibody test and it told me I didn't have it, but it's a cheap antibody test. And even the doctor, when they gave it to me, it came back negative, and she was like, well, it has a 30% false negative rate. I was like, that's a high false negative rate. That's 1 out of 3 shot that it's wrong. Okay.
That's not good.
Yeah. But no, I had something weird at the end of July that matches coof symptoms.
Yeah. For me, I didn't even notice that it was different until I had like 3 days in a row of headaches. And I was like, okay, this is not normal.
See, that was me. It was on and off headaches and fevers for 10 days with no other symptoms at all and no explanation.
Wow. Yeah. So it sounds like you had it.
It probably had the coof.
Yeah.
Then I think I got it again, but probably my wife, who is a disease vector, probably gave it to me second time. No, we had something else again not that long ago that was also very strange. It was like super allergies. And I thought nothing of this because like the weather was changing, but it was clear, you can tell a little bit. It was clear. It was like, this is more off than allergies. And then I remembered that article that they did the fear mongering on the CNN or whatever it was. I don't remember if it was CNN for sure, but they were like, oh no, Delta variant symptoms might be so mild, people will mistake it for seasonal allergies. And I was like, wow. Maybe I have it again, or maybe I have a different one, or maybe I have both variants at the same time. Maybe I took the red and the blue pill. Who knows?
They can just make everything a variant. Be like, you might have thought that you tripped and fell down the stairs, but I think that's the new variant. Like they're just going to make anything that happens to anyone.
I tried to explain. It's like, explain to this guy that was telling me that 95% of the population is going to die. I was like, I would rather get it and die than live in a world where I have to be afraid of it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally, I would rather roll the dice. And he looked at me like I had 2 heads. He's like, how could you want to roll the dice? And it's like, because I don't want to live being told what to do and according to whether or not I can get into a place, whether I did the, what somebody wanted me to do, if I have to wear this stupid bandage on my face or whatever all the freaking time. And it's like, I don't actually like this. And so I don't like it enough to where I don't want this to continue, where I would literally roll the dice. And then his response was like, why won't you roll the dice with the vaccine? And I was like,
Isn't it funny how the people who are so desperate, like to live the rest of their lives or get normal for the rest of their lives, are the people that have not been living their lives for the last year and a half? Like the people who have been the most shut down and like locking themselves down, like more than they actually need to, are the ones that are like, we all need to do this. We can get back to life. It's like if you really wanted to live your life, buddy, like you would have been doing it this whole time. Like a lot of us have.
There's this super weird projection going on. It's like they want to be told what to do. They won't do the thing unless they're told they can do it. So they want to be told what to do and what not to do. They want to be ordered around. And then they project that outward by ordering everybody else to do something. Oh, everybody has to get a vaccine. Everybody has to wear 2 masks. Everybody has to, show up and give 3 drops of your blood to the vampire elites on the second Tuesday of the full moon or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody has to do this magical ritual thing in order, and everybody has to do it. Complete totalitarianism. And it's actually, not to psychologize too much, but I really do suspect that it's like they don't respect in themselves that they have to be told what to do, that they wait for permission to live their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And then they project that out on everybody.
Wow.
And it's like,
when is the last time everyone did something? You know what I mean? In all of humanity, when is the last time that everyone did something?
If your movement depends on everybody doing something, it's already going to fail. Mm-hmm. It's just you're never going to achieve this. Like,
well, it's easier to fight your neighbor than fight the powers that be, right? Because your neighbor is more accessible. You can rant to them on Facebook. You can ream them out on Twitter.
He's a soft target. He's probably not gonna threaten you with your job or whatever else. Yeah, it's really pathetic.
And it takes more time, more reading to look up and go, all right, what's really going on here? Like, who should we really be fighting? And it is harder to do, and it's a little scarier, but it's the real fight that's going on, whether you participate in it or not.
That's right. It should be fighting the collusion, the crony collusion between, say, pharmaceutical companies on the one hand and, say, I don't know, the news media that's running their commercial before and after the segment where they do the fear mongering in between. Mm-hmm. Like maybe they should be fighting the office at CNN that coordinates that.
Yeah. If you look up and see how much advertising, how many advertising dollars are spent by Big Pharma on our mainstream media, like that should tell you everything you need to know. Like
it's so obvious. CNN runs a commercial for some pharmaceutical. They run a fear-mongering segment as the show, and then we have to come back to our next commercial break. And the first thing is another, like Merck commercial or some bullshit. And it's like, dudes, are you not paying attention? Who's deciding what? Do you think? Do you think that this is just, we have to fill these ad slots? No, those ad slots on the very front end are the most expensive ones. Why? Because most people don't watch commercials, so they freaking leave. And, they come back and they're going to catch at least some of the last one, and they're probably going to get up and on the way out of the room to get another, refreshing beverage or whatever it happens to be. They're going to catch a little bit of the first one. Those are the premium slots. Somebody's thinking what makes the most sense to put in there. And if you have something like CNN that's ratings are dying because they don't have Trump to milk, their ratings are just dying. How enslaved are they to their advertisers? The advertisers are going to fill that first and last spot in particular. And how hard is it to conceive of the idea that they would tailor the segment in between those two ads? Don't think of it as the ads on the framing of the segment. It's the segment in between those two ads to turn that segment into an ad for those ads.
How makes hard the ads work better. Yeah.
Why? Because then those people are going to pay more for those exact same spots in a dying rating system next time. Pfizer's still going to give you $1 million or whatever it is for that ad spot because you just ran an 8-minute segment between two of their ads that tells how can people not see that the cronyism this is one of the things where if I were the thrush whispering to Bard the warrior in the Hobbit, it's like that's where you shoot the arrow,
Yeah. the ads have more of an impact if they have a soft ad in between the real ads. I don't think that our news, like our journalists, are all that different than influencers at this point. It's just
I'm
they
not
do
gonna
it a
even, like,
different way. It's like,
and that's right. And I don't, it's all crony. And it's like, I don't want to play the centrist virtue, right? Like, oh, both sides do it. It's all equal. It's not. The left is completely out of its mind. It's not actually all equal. But Fox News does the exact same thing. I don't know how many times, I don't watch almost any news at all now, but I don't know how many times in the past where, I would turn over to see what's on Fox News and they have some segment and it's like, Obama's going to blah, 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 blah. They're freaking out. And then it's like, we have to go to a commercial and it's like, buy gold, immediately.
oh
It's like,
man,
come on, it's like whip up the fear. And then that ad is going to have a higher rate of return. It's going to become a more premium. The business, the cronyism involved in this process is just extraordinary, and it's transparent, and nobody's looking at how, if you're like, oh yeah, some of our huge corporations are kind of leading the country into the toilet to their own benefit, like say Pfizer and Moderna and all the big, pharmaceutical companies that are making that are involved in the vaccine anyway, or these oral drugs that they're wanting to try to. Apparently, it was like the Frankenstein Merck drug that was horrifically scary. But not ivermectin, which is also made by Merck, because there's no new patent on that. But turns out it's also made by Merck. But how hard is it to believe that there's just cronyism going on in the advertising space, and that our media have sold out to these bidders, knowing that they're competing against the internet? The declining ratings have been a huge problem. Blah, 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 blah. It's not that hard. If we think that corporations are leading us around, that's one of the ways in which the media have become complicit in that process. There are others, but that's certainly one of them. And it's amazing to me then that anybody, people are like, well, what's the solution? It's like, don't fucking watch that. It's a commercial sandwiched by commercials. Don't watch it. Mm-hmm. The point of the 8-minute segment is to make you crazy so that the 30 seconds on either side of it that are paid for by advertisers are more impactful to you.
Yep.
Stop participating in it. Here's my critical theory, bitches. The heteronymous interests enter you before you even have a chance to understand the state of your own servitude. It's almost a perfect quote from a real critical theorist in the 60s.
Yeah, they prime you. The news primes you for the ads so that they have more. The more scared you are, the more worried you are for your health, the more you'll be like, I need all the pills, all the jabs, all the things.
Ask your doctor call your doctor again, call your doctor again, call your doctor again. You probably have third-party paying insurance, so who cares if you call your doctor again? Somebody else is paying for it.
Crazy. It's so crazy. Matthew Hammond says, did you hear about Carmen Mola winning €1 million Feminist Literary Award? 3 male screenwriters who wrote under a pseudonym accepted the award. No way.
Yeah, I did hear about that. And it's funny because, one of our fake academic papers, several of our fake academic papers we did back in the Grievance Studies affair were written allegedly by women. But one of them was a first-person perspective, blah, 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 that was written by me. Of a bitter divorced feminist who was angry with her husband and was doing all this strange feministy anger rituals with her girlfriends. It was a, first person account. And so I felt a great amount of affinity for this. It's the claim at the deeper level to make this sound smart. So, because this is the smartest podcast on YouTube. As you know, being that you're on every episode, or almost every episode. Occasionally you check out.
They keep booking me. They just love me.
They keep booking. Yeah. Whoever's in charge of this thing really likes you. You're on it all the time. But the thing is, the deeper point is that they actually believe that experiencing systemic power in the oppressed state of that confers upon you extra sight. That used to be called standpoint epistemology by the feminists. It doesn't usually get called that anymore. It's usually just called positionality or a unique voice of color or the result of structural determinism or whatever it happens to be. But they actually believe that you get, and this is a old school dialectical position for people watching that know what I'm talking about when I say that, they believe that if you are in the oppressor class, and you live in the oppressive world, then you only have the oppressor experience. But if you're in the marginalized class, then you know what it's like to be marginalized, and you know what it's like to live in the oppressor's world. So you have two, you have double. W.B. Du Bois literally called it double consciousness. literally a double consciousness, which Jose Medina in 2013 expanded to what he calls kaleidoscopic consciousness, which does not involve drugs, but until after you read it and you need to wash your mind.
So if I'm dumbing down this, it sounds like I'm just taking the movie Parasite, for example. Would they have double consciousness because they know the experience of being poor, but they also know the experience of being like rich and privileged because they work for these people?
Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly it. In fact, the old name for this is the master-slave dialectic, which I don't think you're allowed to say anymore. That's what I mentioned. Rousseau, I mentioned Hegel. Both of them were very interested in the master-slave dialectic. Marx called this class conflict. You awaken a class consciousness that you are the oppressed, dependent poor in the rich man's world, and you already know his values and how he operates, but you also understand what it's like to be screwed over by this world. So there is a deep idea here. And the funny part of this circumstance, winning this €1 million award, with €1 million on the line, the judges, who presumably being feminist, believe that being a woman gives you a particular perspective that can't be replicated by man, weren't able to they couldn't detect that they were being fooled. Right. So this would be like an ideological Turing test, and the writers have passed it because they were able to pass themselves off as feminist women or a feminist woman, whereas the judges failed it. So this is in the same vein as what we did with the Grievance Studies affair as well. It's exposing that whatever kernel or grains of truth that this idea of standpoint epistemology or whatever might have to it, it's not nearly the degree that the activists and the scholars involved in it milk it for. It's way less.
And haven't you heard people say like the right kind of understands the left, but the left doesn't really understand the right, but they know themselves? I'm butchering that quote. But...
No, I think I don't think that's necessarily even a quote. I think that there was actually data that backed that up. I think that it actually showed that if you ask people to describe their own political positions and the political positions of the opposing side, that the right did a better job, at least when the survey was done. Maybe it's not a timeless thing, but the right did a better job of understanding their own perspective and the other perspective, whereas the left did a better job of understanding their own perspective, but not both perspectives, did not understand the right. That's probably a consequence of the fact that they literally have written off as deplorable everybody, half an inch to their right, and refuse to engage with them or entertain any of their ideas or hear them out or try to understand them, because lest they become polluted. That's the same thing when I read that quote from Herbert Marcuse at the beginning, their idea was that the language itself has its familiar uses and abuses. It's already poisoned with the power dynamics. So we need a new one. Yeah.
But that's just a way to tear down what you don't like and rebuild what you do. Like, oh, we need a new constitution that's woke. Oh, how convenient for the people that want to, rewrite the rules. Just say that they're like better or superior somehow.
That's right. Exactly. It's evil. Yeah.
Do you think history is purposely ignored or distorted to usher in or sort of rebrand communism, Marxism, anti-racism, which is really just rebranded racism? It's like, all right, now it's your turn.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the rebranding game, it's what the same quote, this is like basically it's just rebrand of the project. Let's call it something different. So communism didn't work out. We're not going to do that. We're going to have liberation now. Liberation. Oh, that didn't work out. So now we're going to have justice. And it's this kind of like cyclical rebranding of the same bad ideas over and over and over again. So yeah, I think it does. The emperor didn't have any clothes, and just because he said that his clothes changed colors doesn't mean that they actually did. But it makes it hard to see it at first. These linguistic kind of smoke screens are really tricky. They're hard to see through. So yeah, I think so.
You talked about the necessity or the importance of having kind of like diagnostic statements or questioning to constantly question, this language, these ideas. I think we have some idea, like in terms of a school setting, who should be asked these questions, but I don't know if you could give a little advice on like who we should be looking out for to ask these questions when we talk about, doing diagnostic statements or like really breaking down like, okay, well, there's this word for it, but what is this idea really about? Like what is really being pushed?
So, I want to understand your question correctly. So are you asking who we should ask in order to understand better? Because the answer to that
I
question
think so.
apparently
Like,
is me.
who should we be pushing these questions on? Or like, if we're trying to get a sense of, like, a good example, I guess, is like, right, you ask your teacher, your kid's teacher,
Oh,
like,
gotcha,
can you
gotcha.
break down what exactly you're teaching? Or what this, I hear you talking about, like, equity. Well, what exactly are you, what's
Yeah, yeah,
behind
yeah.
that? And are there ways, or I just want to make sure I'm like explaining this well. Who else should we be questioning other than, say, like, our kids' teachers
Oh my God.
to make sure?
Shareholders should be questioning their boards of trustees or their corporate boards or whatever it happens to be, to find out, they should be questioning, like, what is this stakeholder crap we're switching to, all this ESG. This is inside baseball, and people listening people who know, they know.
What's ESG?
Environmental, social, and governance metrics to make sure that your
Oh,
company plays by the new
right.
world order. Yeah, but shareholders should be asking their corporate boards, did you know that you were going to screw us over like this? We should be asking people that are in charge of our banks, frankly, did you know that we were going to transition to an entirely new economic model 3 years ago when you signed a 30-year mortgage with me? Should be asking the person who signed a car agreement with us 5 years ago, or sorry, last year for 5 years. Did you know that all of a sudden there's going to be a supply chain shock and we're going to transition completely out of gasoline vehicles, blah, blah, blah. So there's going to be no resale value for this thing. We're going to have to go to this total. When did you know this stuff? People should be asking those kinds of questions. We should be asking questions of everybody. However, to answer your question more directly, who is in the public trust? So who over in some way connected to us. It's like, not, I don't need to go ask, a school board member of Riverside County or something like that in California. But there are people in your local governance all the way up, which, by the way, goes all the way up to your congressman and whatever, because they're locally districted to you, that you have some purchase on in terms of being able to start to ask these questions. And if they're in the public trust, this stuff does not belong in that space, and they owe you answers. So you should be, whether your teacher, this you have to do, there's two places also that you want to ask questions. The teacher as an archetype or an example is like the proximate thing. It's the closest thing to where you are. Your kid goes to school, they have a teacher, you ask the teacher. It's the closest point of contact. That's one rule. You should always be checking with that to see what's going on, because that's what's actually touching you. So you should be asking your county commission, or whatever. Also, that's pretty close point of contact. But on the other hand, you should also be going as high up the chain as you can. The stuff in the middle is less important. As high up the chain as you can. And so school board or school superintendent or principal or whatever, as far up the chain as you can reach. And you have every right, especially if it's something in the public trust, like in public schools, or if it's something you're paying for, like in private schools, you have every right to go ask these questions and to demand not just, kind of political BS answers to them, but legitimate, deep answers to these that satisfy every question that you have. And to the degree that it's possible, you should be able to, issue that if their answers aren't successful or is acceptable, that maybe the kids need to come out. Maybe I don't need to invest in this company anymore. Maybe the board needs to be dissolved. Maybe, somebody needs to go to jail, depending on what the situation is. And these kinds of questions need to just keep getting asked and keep getting asked, keep getting asked. If you look at the Loudoun County, Virginia school situation, which is a complete shit show that's melting down in all regards, it's melting down partly because people kept asking the questions. They just kept asking, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? And more
Wow.
stuff that was getting covered up and that was getting manipulated started to come to light in the broad, not formal legal discovery process, which will hopefully begin as suits are filed, but throughout. So these are the people you need to be asking questions. If you are considered part of their constituency in some sense or another, though, or represented by them in the public trust, you should probably be bothering them and demanding answers, because we're at that point where answers need to be demanded. If you have some kind of a fiduciary or financial agreement with them, these kinds of questions should probably be asked. What did you know and when did you know it? Did you sign this contract in mala fide? And if you did, what are we going to do? Because that's a lawsuit. And are you willing to do that? Those are the kinds of things. And I know this is like is probably a heavier answer than you're looking for. But
No, it's great. It's really great. It's like each person, you could make a chart of like, I think this is making folks realize like you have so much more influence and power than you realize. So if you were to like draw out like what is my whole sphere of influence here, and then you just write out in every area of your life, right? Like the things you buy or where your kid goes to school, right? And then you draw up like, okay, what's the furthest I can go in all these areas? Like, wow, you've got a lot of phone calls to make now, or you've got potentially a lot of influence because you can ask more questions than I think you realize to more people.
yeah, I mean, it's very important to also recognize that this kind of public pressure works. It doesn't work fast. It doesn't. You as the one person against the machine is you're going to bounce off the battleship or armor or whatever. But the truth is that if you ask and another person's asking and more people ask, the next thing you know, there's so many people that the FBI has to step in and say that you're all domestic terrorists. I guess the Department of Justice, domestic
Yeah.
terrorists for caring about what's going on in your school. This has two effects. One is you either eventually will push and get your way, which is a win and good for you and good for the kids. You know, you get your answers, which maybe they're satisfactory, or you're going to find out that there's a problem and start pushing for steps to solve it. Or like with the Justice Department naming parents domestic terrorists on what looks like some extremely shady circumstances, and some weird collusion with the White House and all kinds of things that are very ethically dubious. You not only reveal things, but end up forcing their hand. Merrick Garland deciding to declare parents domestic terrorists did more to galvanize the country against them than probably anything that's happened so far, even more than the vax mandates. And history has actually shown that when there's these kind of attempted revolutions, one of the weakest points they have is if they lose parents. If parents start to believe that their children are legitimately at risk by the changes that are attempting to be swept in, parents become a force that these regime change attempts tend not to do very well at reckoning with. Because if you're a parent, chances are pretty good you will literally do anything, including sacrifice your own life for the welfare of your children. And so the sense of what do you have to lose gets really, really real really fast. And that passion of a mama bear, and not to put the dads down, but B, a dad who's the mom told him to go do something, because we all know how dads really work. Mom said, you should go do this. And dad was like, you're right, I should. Yes, dear. Two most important words in any marriage. Yes, dear, at least for the husband. And
do you have a happy wife, happy life pillow in your house?
I don't have a pillow, but I actually have a policy that I won't accept. I'm not even interested in hearing any feminist theory that can't explain the existence of that aphorism. If you can't explain why happy wife, happy life is a long-standing statement, it's patriarchy. Really, is it? Is that patriarchy? Really? No. Oh, it's benevolent sexism. You're damn right it is. If you can't explain why happy wife, happy life is a thing, I don't want to hear your feminism. It's like I have a friend whose position on the pronouns is extraordinarily strong. She's a detransitioner, and her stance, it's like where Chappelle was like, yeah, I'll talk to you if you admit that Hannah Gadsby's not funny. And hers is actually like, yeah, I'll recognize your pronouns if you admit that you're mentally ill.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, good point.
If you're struggling, I got your back. If you're not struggling, okay. Mine wasn't that hard. My respect pronouns rule for myself is I respect them until you abuse me in any way whatsoever. If you demand it or you get pissed or whatever, like, respect is a two-way street, and you just lost mine.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love it. Like, respect has to be number one. Quickly from Vincent Adrian's, Uber surge pricing in Nashville can be a pain. Gotta support creators making amazing and funny content. Thank you so much. Yeah, there was a couple of surges out there.
Yeah, I've been getting hit with that with the Ubers.
From Demanji, hey Chrissy, how the hell are you? Hail chat. Thank you. And one here from, I want to scroll by it. Ooh, Myth Informed.
I told you.
More and more K-12 educators are explicitly stating that they are teaching CRT. Are they going to try and defend the indefensible?
Yeah. So good question, Mike. That's a joke, by the way. The answer. So this is true for people who don't know. I think literally like within the last 20 minutes before I got on here, so now like a couple hours ago, I saw on Twitter, like it's probably near the top of my Twitter feed right now, in fact, that Fairfax County just openly said, yeah, of course we teach critical race theory, and what we're critical race theory informs like all these things. So they're actually now starting to admit we teach critical race theory, the lie that they've been saying all year. It's not in schools. It's not in schools. It's not in schools. Now they're saying, well, yeah, it is. And, or they're starting to. So this is more cracks in the dam, right? This is more of that like positive, the linguistics terrain is, they're being forced into a word that we, in a sense, now control, which is bad for them. Are they going to try to defend the indefensible? Well, that's really their only option. So this is something that is true with the critical race theory push, but it's also true with the weird regime in charge of the country right now, and in any blue state, the state governments as well, that I've been saying for a little bit, which is they know they've crossed the Rubicon, and you have to understand what that means. So hopefully we all are well versed enough to understand what that the metaphor is. But once you've crossed the Rubicon, that's the point of no return. That's the idea. You can't go back. It's a river that, when they crossed it, they knew that that was it. They had to fight, and there's no going back. So if you've crossed the Rubicon and you don't know it, then you're in trouble. But if you cross the Rubicon and you know it, you only have one logic, which is to forever double down. As far as like the metaphor goes, they have no option but to double down, double down, double down, double down, double down. So the next phase of the CRT fight probably ends up having to be, of course, we're teaching it because it's absolutely necessary. It's one of the most important and beneficial things. And then they're going to try to frame out that they are not going to do a very good job of defending, because it's not what they do. What they do is they distort their opposition. And so rather than defending the indefensible, they're going to shift the distortion of the opposition, what would be us, to frame us out as though we're some other kind of either horrible, crazy, or stupid entity. Those are always the three things. Oh, it's a conspiracy theory. You're crazy. Oh, only a racist would believe that. You're horrible. You don't even understand what the systemic racism really is. You're stupid. It's always one of those three pits that they try to push their opposition. So rather than to say, are they going to try to defend the indefensible? I'm going to say that they are not going to abandon the defense of critical race theory, but they're not necessarily going to defend critical race theory itself so much as they're going to denigrate everybody else for one of those three reasons for not being on the program. They'll shift to a very arrogant, of course we teach it. We've always wanted to teach it. We always have taught it. They'll probably even say we've been teaching critical race theory in the schools since like the 1930s or some completely nonsense thing, referencing some historical lesson that, has been a standard part of whatever. And of course we've always been doing it.
It's exactly what they did with the jabs. Like, they compare the new one to the old ones. It's like, we've been getting vaccines forever. It's normal. It's normal to take, that you've had them to fly to certain countries. It's like, oh, we are not talking about the same thing here.
It's totally normal that you have to have like a dengue fever vaccine to fly to a country where dengue fever, which is really bad, or yellow fever or malaria or whatever. It's like, come on. Did you know that George Washington forced the Continental Army to get the smallpox vaccine? Did you know that smallpox has a 66% fatality rate? Like, come on.
Yeah. They're just gonna work harder to insult anyone who questions them, and
it's because they don't have anything. They literally, it's funny. It's always iron law of woke projection. Jon Stewart referred to Fox News as Bullshit Mountain. They live. Why do they live on Bullshit Mountain? That's all they have, and occasionally they'll pick up a handful of it and throw it at your face.
Yeah. That's good. Bullshit Mountain. It's like all your views are like of Bullshit Mountain. From Tommy Riley. Hey James, would you spend some time on Afro-pessimism? Oh, am I saying this wrong? Afro-pessimism?
It's spelled wrong. So it's Afro-pessimism is.
God. I was like, is this like being negative about Afros? No. Afro-pessimism for the new Discourses Encyclopedia. I know Afro-pessimism seems fringe, but it's debated in academia.
I need to put Afrocentrism and Afro-pessimism both on the list and get around to them eventually. The next big push on the encyclopedia, because the next big push in my research is probably, and I've been really behind on the encyclopedia. I've had a fairly busy summer. I've had like 80 flights this year or thereabouts. Whoa. And so I've been around, and spare time, I wrote a book, and I've been doing all these talks and podcasts and like different things. So it's like, it's been a bit thin, unfortunately. I do intend to continue working on the encyclopedia. The next push is mostly going to be education terminology. So unless it tucks kind of into that, or I get a wild hair, I probably won't hit that one specifically soon, but I need to put it on the list. So I appreciate that. And I actually am going to write it down when I get off here to put both of those on the list. and get to them. They are interesting. A lot of people don't know, for example, that like Ibram Kendi, I don't know specifically about Afro-pessimism, which is this kind of, pessimistic view tied up in race. I don't know if a lot of people know that with Afrocentrism that Kendi had a mentor named, I forgot what the guy's real name is. It's like Terry something or Terry Michaels or Murray or some normal ass thing. Like Kendi's real name is Henry Rogers, but he has this mentor that goes by what is it, Molefi Keti Asante or something like that. It's an Afrocentrist guy. And like he has these crazy ideas about how like, we need to recenter all of our knowledge around Africa rather than Europe. And this is what Afrocentrism versus Eurocentrism is about. And it's like, basically the view is the Europeans stole everything from the Egyptians, and the Egyptians were like really the blackest of the black people. And it's like they were actually sub-Saharan, even though they're not. And then this is an absolutely crazy conspiracy theory about the history of the world. And this guy just has some way out there views that some people should be very suspicious of. And it turns out to be one of Ibram Kendi's like big mentors. So it's not like Ibram Kendi is coming to this from this kind of very considered place. He's coming to it from a very specific set of very radical positions. That's an aside to make up for the fact that the answer to the question was really kind of no, not yet.
Okay. I was just saying, is it similar to what you've described as sort of like a resentment collective?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. That's so fascinating. And it's cool to know that this, maybe not cool, but like this has been going. This is not a new thing. This is not something that's just been happening in the 2000s. Like,
holy crap! I just found this out.
Sown.
I found this out just recently when I was preparing for a set of lectures on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So early on in my research with all of this stuff, I discovered this writer named Judith Katz, and it didn't really register with me until I found out later that she was the one that cited on that crazy white supremacy culture thing from the Smithsonian that they put out last summer, where it's like, showing up to work on time. That's white supremacy culture.
Oh, yeah.
That horrific thing. Objectivity, science, that's white supremacy culture. So they put that out, what culture of whiteness or whiteness culture or whatever it was. And it cites has one citation, and it's this article from Judith Katz from like 1990. And I was like, Judith Katz. And I end up looking into it, and she wrote this book in 1978 called White Awareness. And it's like, you read this and you're like, did Robin DiAngelo like plagiarize this? She's like saying, racism should be categorized as a mental illness and blah, blah, blah. And, whites need to be aware of their racial identity. It's all like super, super crazy stuff. And then that turns out, she cites this woman, Patricia Bidall, that was this kind of feminist activist, very neo-Marxist kind of flavored feminist activist in the late 60s and the early 70s. And I think she's still around. I think she's at American University now still. And she wrote this thing in 1970 about like, what's it called? Race. And I always forget the title of this for some reason. I cannot remember it. But it was one of the first diversity books ever written, like what we would identify as diversity, equity, inclusion books now. And it was like new ideas about race or something like this. I'd have to look it up. And I can spell her last name though, Bidol, D-O-L, if anybody wants to look her up, Bidol. And so the whole thing, anti-racist or racist, there is no neutral. You're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. This is all this stuff that we think is Robin DiAngelo 2015 forward or 2019 forward, all 1970. And then she got commissioned by the NEA, the second largest teachers union, National Education Association, to write a guidebook for educators in 1971 and 2 that she published in 1973. That's a distillation of that book that is exactly all of this crazy anti-racist stuff. A lot of this stuff was going on in the 70s, early 70s. Wow. Already in the same form. A lot of people don't know that the term microaggression, they probably heard that for the first time in like 2015. Mm-hmm. They're like, what is this? Now it's in every corporate training. The word was actually coined way back in 1970 by a guy named something like Chester Pierce. Chester M. Pierce is a psychologist. I think he was Harvard, but I might have that mixed up. A psychologist, and he came up with this idea of this new racism called microaggressions and a psychological theory about how microaggressions work in 1970. That's a long time ago. Turns out he also allegedly, from what I understand, worked on the MK Ultra project for the CIA, where they screwed with people's heads and fed them a bunch of LSD. And then he's the guy who invented microaggressions 51 years ago. It's
Wow.
like there's some weird like connections going on, but more to the point, we think this stuff is new. Those were both things that were written in 1970, 51 years ago. It's a long time that this has been stewing and brewing and being disseminated by the NEA. 50 years ago, the NEA was already commissioning and disseminating this exact kind of information, where kind of an anti-racist movement kind of swept through feminism and education and legal activism in the late 1960s, starting in the late 1960s, after the violence of 68 backfired on them. They all became education activists, and they swept all this garbage in that long ago.
Wow. That is pretty amazing. I think Bidol sounds like my doll for bisexuals. I don't know. That's what I've been thinking.
Yeah,
the whole time.
or for having to listen to the president.
yeah.
Like he's ranting again. Cornholio, give me my Bidol.
Oh, right, with his in his jetpack position, right? It's like these are old ideas, but if we can make them seem new and frame it like it's progress and we're evolving, like, well, that's how they get you.
Yeah, that's the part that gets me though. Going back and reading that stuff from the 70s, which I only did in the past couple of months, is like, holy crap, everything today is just this recycled. It's not even better. It's literally just like recycled.
This is how I feel. If white isn't a culture, then explain Wes Anderson films.
Well, I mean, that's a point, but what you're doing here is conflating whiteness and hipster.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, we don't have a lot.
Not all white people.
It's true. It's so true.
Not all. Not all whites.
Not all whites. I don't know.
I see you got your Let's Go Brandon flag behind you.
I do. And actually there was somebody passing out Let's Go Brandon keychains at the Jacked Brunch in Nashville. They were like these classy, like leather little, I took one.
I love I saw a senior correspondent on the Twitter earlier for CNN had tweeted that some congressman wore a Let's Go Brandon mask, a face mask or whatever. And he said that he was advising that the sitting president should have perform sexual acts on himself or something, like trying to make it look bad. These poor people.
It's crazy. And I think the kid that I know it was a collaboration, the Let's Go Brandon song. It was like Bryson Gray and this other like young rapper who's like 19, and he was at this brunch too. And I wanted to say hi.
I missed the wrong brunch. Or the right brunch or whatever.
Everybody who was the white brunch.
Yeah.
No.
That's right. All right. We'll let it go. We'll let Brandon go.
From Matthew Hammond.
But they found a fake Brandon. Can you help me with they found a prop Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is how psychotic these people are. This is how out of touch with the human condition that they are. They went and found a disabled person who may or may not be an actor, who knows, named Brandon. And they're like, oh yeah, let's go, Brandon. Come on.
It's entertainment. It's all theater. Yeah, it's easier to do that than consult your actual reality. From Matthew Hammond, are there any people creating HR training and materials for non-woke companies to use? Maddie, this is actually a really great point. My friend just showed me something that her company had put out. And, this was in addition to her sort of annual, diversity training or whatever, the tests you have to take online, security awareness, all that stuff for like anti-hacking. But now that she was showing me there's now this additional program that you can be a change agent. You can take more of these classes about inclusion, about equity. And this is like voluntary, but I feel like it sounds like there's pressure there. Like if you become a change agent, that puts you more in the favor of the higher ups, I imagine. So it feels like there's a little bit of this pressure to like go the extra mile to be in this group. And I just was like, it was kind of blowing my mind.
How
What she was
do
showing me.
people hear the phrase change agent and not realize that something seriously nefarious is afoot? Like, you can
Yeah.
become a change agent. Like, that's actually that's the kind of term that in 50 years, if everything doesn't break, we're all going to look back at like, what? And like the brown shirts that we use now. It's like, that's what that means, is brown shirt. It's
Do
literally
these
what it is.
companies, does that corporation, do they get kickbacks or like
Now
some
we
kind
get
of
to
funding for pushing?
now we get to it. Yeah. Yes, they do.
Because why go to all that trouble
As
to
a
have new
matter of fact, they
stationery
do.
and
No,
yeah.
they do. So let me just answer the question quickly that's there first, and then make a point, and then we'll go into this. The answer is yes. People are trying to make HR training materials outside of the woke orbit, and some of that has some success. Vivek has a program that he wants to see come in that pushes different values, excellence being the key one, to drown DEI or anti-racism or whatever out, make it irrelevant, to basically dilute the poison to the point where everybody's going to pick something better. And so I am a little bit like, my attitude is pretty hard ass on this, because I understand the impulse, but I also understand that the whole industry that's selling this crap is selling snake oil. There was no disease in the first place, and then they're selling you poison, and it's making things worse, and then they sell you more of the so-called medicine. And so there shouldn't be a replacement for this. And as a matter of fact, a replacement diversity training justifies the logic behind having fucking diversity training in the first place, when the correct answer should be, there is none of this happening at all. Like, this was all artificial. We don't replace this with some softer version. You don't get a fake COVID pass and then justify the vaccine passport. It's the same mentality. You don't justify the logic of the tyranny by participating in a soft way. And this is one part. Now, do they get paid? Yes. What do you think this ESG we hit on? What do you think this ESG is? I've phrased it this way: that you have this cart and a horse, right? And you have this cart, and the cart is full of communism and fascism and all these terrible, like, digital IDs and whatever else they want to do. And the horse is whoever's pulling all of this and whatever agenda that they have. And then if you have a cart and a horse, I know that not everybody has been to the border and seen the whips, but if you have a cart and a horse, that you have to hook the cart to the horse. There is actually like a pin that you would put in, that you might call like a lynch pin or something like that. Or the thing that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, Raphael, the size, so you stick the cart pin in to hold the Okinawan weapons lore that's probably bogus aside. You have this pin, and ESG is the pin that holds the cart to the horse. So you have the muscle pulling us, and then you have the cart full of garbage we don't want, and the pin holding it together is ESG. And the way that this ESG works is that it's a set of metrics: environmental, social, and governance metrics. How well is your company performing? Do you have environmental controls in place? Do you take proactive recycling? Whatever, your E score goes up. Do you have a woke culture? Are you doing diversity training? How many diversity officers do you have? Do you have a full office of diversity? Your S score goes up. How are you governing your company? Are you governing it according to these best practices, which will also include having diversity officers, etc.? Then do you have ESG officers coming in to oversee the whole thing? Even more commissars, even more bureaucracy. Then your G score goes up. And are you playing along by all of the rules that we've set arbitrarily at Davos or whatever else? And you say, well, how the hell do they get anybody to go along with this? Well, A, they offer them financial incentives, like, well, if you lose some money, we'll make sure that comes back to you, by implementing this. Or B, your BlackRock or Vanguard or Goldman Sachs, those being the three biggest asset management firms, and they say, oh, you wanted to have your company be publicly traded, your ESG score has to be above X. Oh, you wanted to have this kind of a capital infusion. Oh, you wanted us to handle your assets for you and make this kind of a return. Oh, you want to be put in the higher return category. Your ESG score has to be so high. Basically, ESG has become the big fear. They win if we get a full-blown social credit system over the average individual. They created a social credit system for corporations already that's called ESG. And ESG is that is the social credit system in corporate America. And if that falls apart, then it all falls apart. But right now, the logic is, oh, well, you need a replacement HR training for diversity so that you can get your S score up so that you can participate, but you don't want to give people woke stuff. So you give them a fake one, as if the diversity and ESG commissar that you're eventually going to have to hire isn't going to be able to root that right out on you sooner or later. So this is why it's like creating a fake training, a fake alternative diversity training when you didn't need a diversity training in the first place, actually reifies the logic of your destruction anyway. It is a short-term solution that's no solution. And so, but why is it all happening? Well, I actually just painted for you the big picture of how all of the world is being destroyed right now. That all the corporations then collude with the governments to make all of this kind of stuff go, and so that each can apply their strengths where they're allowed to. The government can make mandates, they can make laws, they can make executive orders. They can't say censor people, but Facebook and Twitter can. So they have a back and forth deal there. We won't bust up your big crooked business if you do our stuff for us. That aspect of how it works is also there. But the big thing that makes it all go, and all the corporate participation comes down to the fact that asset management firms can jerk them around by a social credit score with the letters ESG.
Wow. Damn. It's like the
It'd be
principal.
like
It's like the principal of the high
ESG's
school
number is 666. It's like that.
Yeah. And I'm thinking like the principal of the school doesn't have to get up off their ass and yell at kids if they have more and more hall monitors. And that's
exactly
like
right.
what's going on with our celebrities, our corporations, one another, right?
Right. And so how you push back at that's an open question, but shareholders really should be asking a lot of questions of their corporate governance boards. And the reason is because this ESG stuff, in the very simplest way, not only does it create that administrative bloat, which is going to be expensive, very expensive, not only is it going to divert resources away from whatever the point of the business is. If your business is to build airplanes like Boeing or whatever, every minute that you devote to some ESG based BS is a minute you're not devoting to building airplanes and selling things. Hello, sexy MILF
Lady
Army.
Fairfax, hello from the James Lindsay MILF Army. Why you have a MILF Army?
Oh yeah, like a billion MILFs standing behind me. It's awesome.
Oh my God, that sounds like a porn.
Yeah, but the point is, shareholders are going to have to challenge corporate structures, and ultimately, what we really need, and does James Lindsay influence Congress? I hope so, because what actually is going to have to happen is some kind of levels of legislative protection that basically outlaw the management that firms like BlackRock are using to do this. Why does anybody have to listen to BlackRock? Well, BlackRock really shouldn't be able to hold companies hostage according to its social vision anyway. That's one thing. But BlackRock is as powerful as it is because it manages other people's assets, and then they get treated like their own assets. So like you might invest lots of money into some fund that BlackRock controls, and so they buy a bunch of shares of Apple with your money and my money and everybody else's money, and then they have like a 15% controlling stake in Apple between all of us.
Wow.
And then they show up as BlackRock and say, Apple, you have to do what we want because we have a 15% control. They have a 0% control.
But it should be we the people. Yeah, you just kind of took our influence.
Yes. And that turns out to be a plug that can be pulled legislatively. You can actually outlaw the practice. It has a name, and I'm not a finance guy, so I don't know what it is, but I heard it the other day. It has a name. You can actually outlaw the practice of pretending that you have a 15% share when really what you're doing is managing assets of 15%. That can actually be done, and that pulls a massive plug on them. Now, they can still play their can you be a publicly traded company games or whatever, but there are other approaches that can be used for that. We're actually in this weird era where, like at the turn of the previous century, we had the steel and railroad and oil and gas or whatever, all these companies that had these trusts between them and controlled everything. And it was the bad old times. We're in this situation again, but now it's the social media and finance industries are the primary ones that are pulling the strings and dipping into stuff they shouldn't be. Another thing BlackRock's doing is buying up single family homes. Again, very easy fix to that is to make it so zoning laws in single family home neighborhoods, all you have to do is create a zone for that and zone those neighborhoods that way and make it so that no one entity can control more than some percentage, 5%, 8%, 2%, 1%, whatever of the properties in that zone. And there are fixes for these things, but that requires people to realize what the problem is, to be willing to take the steps to fix those problems and have the political will behind them to have the courage to do it, because these people also control obscene amounts of money, and money influencing politics, et cetera, is such a big thing. Of course, we also have seen in the last couple of elections that it's not necessarily the case. Proposition, whatever it was, 16, to get rid of the discrimination language in California and the state constitution, which is on the ballot. It was a ballot measure they put forth in the last election. Was, I think, the people to get rid of the discrimination language, the woke side, I think outspent the opposition 13-1 and still lost. So the way that money translates into political power these days is a bit broken. And I think that's because of social media and the internet, which of course they therefore want to control.
Of course. All right. Well, it's good. It sounds like there is a light at the end of the tunnel here. We just have to get smart and know what that is.
Yeah, a few recipes have to be accomplished for that. One is that there are a lot of bot Republicans who need to realize that the logic of the 1980s is over, and we're not in that paradigm anymore, and the recipes that they had at the time aren't going to work, and the dogmas that they have about the market fixing all problems by itself, those dogmas are outdated and incorrect. They don't fit for the time that we're in. So they're gonna have to become less corrupt or get voted out, primaried or whatever, so that at least one of the two political parties can be made cleaner on this. Because if we don't have some people, then we're in big trouble. And right now, half the Republicans are crap. The other thing, though, is actually that that people are going to have to, become informed on their own and get behind these issues and make these issues known and make it clear, even so that the craven politicians want to play along on the right side of this question. I think this thing in the showdown in Virginia is going to be interesting in that regard, because it's going to, if Youngkin wins, which seems plausible at this point, it's going to be an enormous upset to the way that they think they can just do business. And I've heard that from all kinds of strategists at all different levels. So,
it's exciting.
That translation there, though, between money and politics is on the rocks, and it's not the linear relationship or whatever that they would have expected. So that changes the dynamic a bit, but people have to show up. People have to get out there and do it. Like, maybe they're going to steal the Virginia election. Who knows? I doubt it, but maybe they were going to. And if they're intending to, well, you damn well need a lot of Republicans to show up. So when if they are fudging numbers, which I'm not accusing anybody of, I don't think they're likely to be doing that. But if they're fudging numbers, then it looks super, super fake. They have to fudge them way too hard, like getting 81 million votes or something like that.
I think you mean fortify. I think that's the word
fortified is the word. That's
yes.
Right. Fortifying the numbers.
Borrowing.
So people have to, borrowing. You borrow the one, carry the two.
To millions. Yeah. Just carry the millions.
Yeah. Just carry the millions.
Interesting stuff. I saw in the chat, and I wanted to wrap up, but the time has flown with you, James.
That's what happens.
I want to look into this from Douglas. Berkeley just banned single family homes, calling it racist.
Yep, that's right.
Next level.
That's right. So this is another thing, is like, I don't know how you reach to people and get them to realize that when everything in the universe is getting called racist, like, just stop reacting to that. Somebody even told me today, oh, well, I was talking to they were talking to like their representative. I don't know if state or federal. They were talking to the representative, and they're like, oh, they just freak out the second they hear the racist word. Like, they just have to stay as far away from the spot. It's like, no, that's like 2015 logic, and it's going to get you hammered in 2021. That logic. And I know that's like a really not that long time to have to update all of your playbook. But the fact of the matter is that the left's playbook has evolved very, very quickly. And they have they've put into implementation changes very, very quickly that are not being reacted to well. And so you have to play on the 2021 playbook. Oh, family homes are racist. Well, that probably means we need them. Okay. You literally have to ignore the R word unless there's overwhelming evidence for some older meaning of the word that people still understand. And I don't think any of us have actually lost it, except maybe the doctor that we listened to earlier on the video. You have to basically be a PhD to be this stupid about simple things.
Except for you.
Well, I mean, mine's
You're one
math.
of the good ones. Oh, yeah. Interesting stuff.
No, we had a guy in our department who just talked like in the faculty room. You'd think he'd be talking about high level mathematical stuff. All he talked about was like the different, like literally every day, like a broken record was like the different brands of hot dogs and white bread to determine the best hot dog combination that you could possibly get. And like, this is all he ever talked about outside of the classroom.
Oh, wow.
So not all mathematicians are brilliant either. Actually, I went to grad school with one of the activists that's ruining mathematics in the woke way now. Like I literally used to sit across the table from her and talk to her all the
What's
time.
her name?
Carrie Eaton. Carrie Diaz Eaton. It has a hyphen. Good Lord, I almost forgot that she's Hispanic, and that's the end of me.
That's so interesting. Wow. And look at you now.
I thought she was nice enough. I could tell she was kind of leftist and a bit of an activist, but she seemed nice enough as a person. But yeah, she's totally just sandbagging the Mathematical Association of America right now and turning it totally woke.
I can't believe. Yeah, I never thought I would see a day when like math became a thing you could say was racist. But yeah, I think we just need more people being like, all right, just be like, stop calling everything fucking racist.
I mean,
like,
you just heard my heuristic. It's simple. Did a leftist call it racist? Then it's good.
Yeah.
It's that simple. We have to play a little standpoint. Who called it racist? Did a normal person call it racist? Well, maybe we should pay attention. Did a leftist call it racist? Well, that means it's something we want more of.
Yeah.
We definitely want more of what leftists call racist, whether that's objectivity, whether that's math, whether that's equality, whether that's fairness, whether that's having jobs, whether that's single family homes, whether that's a functioning economy, whether that's people being happy, whether it's being able to enjoy a movie, whatever it is, it's all racist.
Yeah.
Classical music, not classical music, other not classical music, more classical music, Beethoven in specific, all great things. The left called them racist. Did a leftist call it racist? We need more of that.
Just like I don't think a thin person invented the word fat phobia. You know, it's like if you have
I don't think so.
That's just a chick who doesn't want to do more cardio. But I get it.
It's like, I get it. No fat chicks.
James, you're an absolute delight. Thank you so much for coming on and spreading
Sorry,
your
I
wisdom
missed you
around.
when you were in my fine state.
I'll have to come back. We'll have to do a
Yeah.
hang. Yeah.
I don't really want to come to New York. No offense, but
no, that's okay. I don't either.
Yeah.
Other than checking out new discourses, where else can people check out your work and stay in touch with you?
I'm on the social medias at Conceptual James, and New Discourses, the company is at New Discourses virtually everywhere that social media exists. Lots of things are going on, so people are going to want to check it out. I got another, like I mentioned, we've got this book we're publishing out of New Discourses by somebody else soon, Counter Woke Craft, that's coming.
Ooh.
It's exciting. It's short, it's easy, it's a field manual, very insightful. Then I've got a book on critical race theory I'm wrapping up right now that hopefully we'll have out before the end of next month, sooner than that, ideally. So that's not straight up. I'm going to call it race Marxism. So get ready. You cannot pre-order those because we're not big enough of a publisher to have that power with the people yet. But you will be able to get them and we will push for them. So you want to come to Conceptual James and New Discourses and follow us. And when we promote those things, you want to get those things because they're going to be great.
Sounds good. And just in time for the holidays. Yeah.
Yeah. The most expensive and least Christmassy Christmas in all of history because of Brandon.
James, you're the best. Chat, thank you so much for your very good questions and insightful comments. And we'll see you next time. Bye.